community involved in maintaining a safe neighborhood. This is more than just a neighborhood watch. We plan to have officers on the ground, helping, aiding, and surveilling for illicit activities. You never know when you're gonna find some young punk doing something illegal out in public. That's why we're gonna have officers everywhere. You never know when they're gonna pop up. So we want PCP in our homes, at our jobs, and in our schools. We want PCP everywhere. How can you get involved in PCP? Well, for starters, you can call your local authorities and ask them how you can get PCP. I'm Byron Kingsley from the Citizens Respecting the Authority of Police.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you are welcome to take control of the airwaves. 603-283-6160 if you would like to do that. And again, that number is 603-283-6160. With you in the studio tonight, it's Aria. And a little bit of an audio issue going on over here. Oh, I still had you muted. That was what was going on. Can we try
Mr.
that again?
Penguin.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot better. Okay, perfect, yeah. Well, I looked down a moment ago and I saw that mic 1 on the board was actually unmuted when it should have been muted prior to the start of the show. So I assume whoever did the show last night just accidentally did not mute mic 1 when they were done. And the result is I think it's no longer the case, but some of the talking that we were just doing may have gone out, but I don't think that's the case any longer. I don't remember. I think we fixed that particular issue when we left GCN, but who knows? So if that went out, oh well.
Oh no, they know all of our dirty secrets now.
Well, I dropped an expletive at least.
Ooh.
I know that, but
that's not good if that's the case.
Yeah, I didn't think the mics were hot, but it was. So hopefully it wasn't actually going out there. It may have gone out there onto the video stream, which I don't care about, obviously. But if it goes out there on terrestrial radio, because we are a radio show, that's a little bit bigger of a problem. But, you know, hot mic situations happen here and there. Luckily, we didn't really say anything bad. Just talking about the election results, I'm surprised.
I'm not sure I am if it's what if it's a libertarian outcome that you're referencing there.
I'm surprised about the entire thing. I'm surprised that Trump won.
Really?
Yes, I'm surprised he won, and I'm surprised he won the popular vote, because that mitigates a lot of the controversy that we've seen in the last few elections where the Republicans won. Historically, they've won the Electoral College, but not the popular vote, and that causes Democrats to be really upset.
I had a suspicion that the Democrats were catering to they're catering to like a left audience, and that's not who they needed to cater to win the election. It's like you can't cater to your own; you got to cater to the opposing side.
I have a different take. I think what went wrong is that they should have stuck with Joe Biden. And I know that sounds crazy because Joe Biden himself was sounding pretty crazy there toward the end, but Joe Biden sounded just as crazy in 2016 when he beat Donald Trump the first time. He was in no better mental or physical shape in 2016, but he managed to beat Donald Trump then.
I mean, the problem is perception now, right? They were making an issue of it now.
Right.
So,
but I don't think that's necessarily... I don't think that Biden was a better candidate, to be clear. I think it was that Biden had won the primary, that people had voted, unwisely perhaps, but the Democrats out there had voted. They had had their primary, and they had chosen Joe Biden. And then Joe Biden stepped down. And the Democrats, the people at the top of the party, instead of doing a new emergency primary or anything along those lines, simply picked Kamala Harris to succeed Joe Biden. And I think that is where they ran afoul. Now, it's true that if something happens to President Biden, his Vice President Kamala Harris takes over. But that isn't necessarily true in a campaign. The Democrats weren't required to give the nomination to Kamala Harris. And I don't think that very many Democrats were particularly inspired by Kamala Harris. Well, I mean, she's a cop. She's a warmonger.
Didn't she not even get, like... I forget what happened, but wasn't there a situation where she ran or something and she didn't get anywhere near the popular votes or whatever for the primary or something?
Yeah, she ran against Biden along with many others in 2016, and she was one of the earliest people to withdraw, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Because this was all a very long time ago, and a lot has happened since 2016. Is it 2006? It's 2020 that I'm thinking of. Yes.
2020?
Yeah. Still, a lot has happened since 2020, including the bulk of COVID-19 and my arrest in 2021, my prison sentence. So like 2020, I don't remember a whole lot from that particular time frame. However, I do recall that Kamala Harris was one of Joe Biden's opponents, and just no one supported her. She's this former prosecutor, ex-cop, drug warrior that didn't motivate anyone, any of the core people who make up the Democratic base. As you mentioned, they are leftists.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the Democratic establishment, the ones that selected Hillary Clinton back in 2016, decided that Kamala Harris was a better bet than almost anyone else. Bernie Sanders, I think, would have beaten Donald Trump.
Did Harris actually like campaign for anything that would have targeted the middle or the right? Because I know Trump did, as far as like libertarians at least, and cryptocurrencies, and he went to the Libertarian National Convention. Did she do anything of that nature to try and cater to the other side? Because it's almost like Trump did way more and to cater to the other side, and then like Harris did nothing. But
I didn't really follow
either,
the presidential election, so I can't say.
I can't say that. I can't really say either, but it didn't feel like it to me.
But you are right that Donald Trump did at least cater to the libertarians. And I know what people are thinking. Libertarians are a non-issue in America politically, but we do represent roughly 2 to 5% of the voting population, depending on where you're at.
And the other issue here is that there's, it's like when you're running a 50-50 race, even a small percentage is going to make a difference.
And it certainly looks like that small percentage of people made a difference. I was watching the election results. Now, I did not actually vote in this election. I intended to, and I was going to vote for Donald Trump. And I still don't like saying that, but I was going to do it because he had promised to commute Ross Ulbricht's sentence.
I feel like I'm the only libertarian who voted for the libertarian candidate.
That's fine. You just said you didn't even know he was running.
Yes, except that when I got to the I did know like slightly before, but when I looked at the poll, not the polls, the sample ballot, right, like just before I actually went to the vote,
yeah,
I did learn that he was running, but I didn't know that. I knew the name, but I didn't know he was running.
Yeah, we had his vice presidential pick on the show with us when we were at PorcFest. Regrettably, we did not get Chase Oliver himself onto Free Talk Live, but I don't think it would have mattered. I would not have wanted to be the one running for president in a year where Donald Trump attended the Libertarian Party National Convention and then promised to do the one thing that is almost guaranteed to garner support from massive amounts of libertarians, which is pardon Ross Ulbricht and Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. Those are like the three big things for libertarians. Yeah. And he didn't do any of those three things, but he did promise to commute Ross Ulbricht's sentence. And a lot of people I know were there, and they described the auditorium as just a standing ovation, people roaring, applauding, stomping their feet. It was tremendous.
At the Libertarian Convention?
Yes. When Donald Trump made his promise to commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht.
Because I was going to say they also booed Trump.
They did. But when he made this particular promise... And
that's absolutely, yeah. I definitely believe that was the case from my recollection of what happened.
And I saw a lot of libertarians online, myself included, and a lot of them here on the show and in other libertarian circles saying that they were going to vote for Donald Trump in order to do whatever little minor inconsequential thing they could in order to help Ross Ulbricht be free, myself among them. Now, I didn't actually vote because last Sunday night my boyfriend went to the hospital and I had to stay there with him until like 6 o'clock in the morning Monday. And then I spent all of Monday, Tuesday, and most of Wednesday at the hospital with him. So I really didn't get a chance to vote. And I'm thankful for that. He got sick at exactly the right time because I wasn't proud of the fact that I was going to be voting for Donald Trump. I'm not happy about that. I didn't want to do it. Right.
See, I kind of had a different attitude on this. I kind of wanted Trump to win in that I think Harris would just have been a worse candidate. But at the same time, like the Democrats have done everything in their power to mess things up even more. And Donald Trump, I do not like Donald Trump. I've never voted for Trump. But it's like, and the one reason I didn't vote for Trump in this election is because even though he said he would, pardon Ross, and I'm a big fan of that, is that he ends ultimately, like, it's not going to make a difference anyway. I mean, New Hampshire wasn't going to go to Trump. So, and it can actually negatively impact our libertarian, our ability to run as libertarians in New Hampshire. So like those are
especially with
factors.
the governor race. If the Libertarian Party, if the Libertarian candidate running for governor gets, I think, 2% of the vote, then we get our own automatic ballot access in forthcoming elections until the next governor's race or something to that effect.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Voting for the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire, especially for the governor race, makes a huge difference to other libertarians here on the ground. But you say Democrats have messed things up, and like that's true. But it's important to keep in mind that the Republicans have also messed things up pretty badly.
I am
because
very critical of Trump,
no doubt,
in terms of tariffs and all sorts of things from before.
I know you are, but I want to point out, because the listeners, we live in a world where if you criticize Kamala Harris or Democrats, everyone assumes you must be a Republican.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
No, we're neither Republicans nor Democrats here. And if you want to look at the top 10 poorest states in the United States, I don't know what 10 those are off the top of my head, but I'm willing to bet it's all of these red states down here in the southeast corner of this map.
Yeah.
All of them Republican states. Most of these states that are not doing particularly well right now tend to be Republican states like Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Georgia. Those are 5 of the worst states in the United States, right? And they're hardcore Republican states. Georgia, not so much. I think it's a swing state these days. But still, Republicans not doing any better of governing things than Democrats. Because governing itself is just a fundamentally flawed idea that is never actually going to work. Regardless, I didn't expect Trump to win. And I said a few years ago that I didn't think that Trump was going to win in 2024. And I have to eat those words now because he absolutely did win. To my immense surprise, he won both the Electoral College with 312 votes and the popular vote. Kamala Harris underperformed Joe Biden in every single state. And Donald Trump won all of the 7 swing states that Joe Biden would have, not that Joe Biden would have taken, but he won all 7 of the critical swing states that he needed to win.
Yeah, I have to say, I didn't think it was a good idea for Trump to run again as far as like the Republicans were concerned, because he already lost
he did
in a prior cycle. And that's not usually a good indicator for future elections, but just things they did, I think, a pretty impressive job as far as, he did say a lot of things that were kind of crazy, but at the same time, he didn't say as much, I don't think, as he's said in the past. Like, he almost toned it down a bit, I think. I just didn't hear quite as much.
I think the Republicans could have run someone else as well, but this is one of the things I actually like about the American political system. We like to think of the Republicans and the Democratic parties as being this tightly controlled apparatus that can control candidates and control what they say and who gets chosen. And that's kind of true. But if you have enough grassroots momentum behind you, and I hesitate to use the word grassroots in regard to Donald Trump, but if you have enough organic momentum behind you, then they can't stop you. And this happened when I ran for sheriff a few years ago, where people asked the question, why didn't the Cheshire County Republicans, why didn't the party leadership keep me from running? Why didn't they stop this from happening? And the truth was, they couldn't. There was nothing they could have done short of having me illegally killed. There was nothing legal they could have done to prevent this from happening. And the same thing is true of the Trump campaign, where there was nothing the Republican machinery could have done legally to keep Donald Trump from winning the nomination. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's something else here too. I think, as we're speaking about this election cycle, I don't think the Republicans and Democrats are really all that different from one another. I mean, I think that if I'm not
Certainly
mistaken,
not.
the Democrats are now like pushing for border walls and tighter border security, and it's like all the same stuff that Trump was doing, and then if you look at like the different presidents and the Democrats and Republicans, vice versa, when after Trump instituted the tariffs, which basically had a cost of living increase about 13, affected about basically you're paying about 13% more on most goods that you buy as a result of those tariffs that Trump implemented. But the thing is, Trump then got rid of the tariffs, and what happened was it when Joe came in and won, he reinstituted the tariffs. It's like these Democrats and Republicans they're really not that different from each other when you look at their actual policies and what they do.
They're not. Their messaging is different, and they just
Messaging
appeal
is
to different
but
teams.
If you look at what they actually do, it's
but people
not
don't
different.
people don't do that, right? They listen to what they say, and the actual results of what they do doesn't matter to the average person. Like both parties are dropping bombs on people. But because Obama spoke real nicely and said pleasant things, he was given the Nobel Peace Prize, and people called him the peace candidate, and they love him. And it doesn't matter that he was a horrific warmonger. But for some perspective on all of this, between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, there were roughly 145 million-ish votes cast. When you add in the other candidates and all of the people who wrote in Mickey Mouse, that number might get to about 150 million. To be safe, let's say 150 million votes were cast in the 2024 election. The population of the United States, the adult population of the United States, is about 260 million people, which means that about 110 million people, 110 million adults, did not vote in this thing. Roughly 1/3 of the population said, I don't want anything to do with this.
What's interesting about that is that's a shocking number of people who actually turned out on election day. And presidents usually, presidential elections usually turn out more people, but that is still I don't know if that was, I don't know if I was hearing that was one of the highest election turnouts in history, but that is definitely a high number for like modern history.
It is. And there's 320-ish million Americans, but that number includes children. So it's not a fair comparison point. But we can look at this and make the comparison point that still roughly 1/3 of Americans simply wanted no part in this. And good for those.
That is telling.
Good for those, that 1/3 of Americans. If you consider if you consider there to be a third option of just like not doing this thing, that would have won by a ratio of almost 2-1. But the Libertarian Party did terribly in this election. It's the first time I recall ever seeing Jill Stein, who is apparently just the perpetual candidate for the Green Party. She always runs as the Green Party presidential candidate, and she always seems to do about the same. It's the first time I've seen her beat the Libertarian Party candidate. Robert Kennedy, who ran as an independent, beat the Libertarian Party candidate. Now, this is a particularly embarrassing thing to recognize because the Libertarian Party has an enormous machine behind it. It's the most well-funded of the third parties. It's not as well-funded as the Republicans or the Democrats, but there is a huge gap in funding, in capabilities, in reach, in activism between the Libertarian Party and, say, the Green Party or the Democratic Workers' Party or whatever other third party you can conjure up. The Libertarian Party for many years has been considered the main third party. It's the only one that has any chance whatsoever of ever being taken seriously and ever putting candidates in office. And it has done that in some smaller elections. But this result here, where Chase Oliver got 0.4% of the vote, it makes me question a few fundamental things. And one of those things is the fact that Chase Oliver is gay, right? Which obviously I don't care about that at all.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he is gay. But a lot of people, a lot of the right-wingish leaning libertarians are really upset about that.
Are you serious?
So, yes, Chase Oliver supports drag queens or something, so they started accusing him of being a child groomer, and you know they trotted out all of the nonsense that they always do against someone who's LGBT and who's like, hey, you know, it's probably wrong to put your children in death camps. Anything short of that to these people on the right is child grooming.
Yeah.
So he was repeatedly called a child groomer and other horrible things that are obviously not true by right-wingers on Twitter. I'm thinking about people like Jeremy Coffin. The Libertarian Party of New Hampshire released a statement condemning Chase Oliver as the Libertarian Party's presidential candidate.
Wait, what?
And they weren't the only ones who did this.
I mean, I know the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire has been messed up here lately, but this just goes along with a lot of the other stuff that Jeremy Kaufman has been just like saying. That's just like, wait, what?
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up real quick, but
these aren't libertarians. This is like right wing kind of nonsense.
Yeah, and it happened. It's going to take me a minute to pull it up, but I don't know. It's going to take me a minute to pull it up. But anyway, there were several libertarian state parties that spoke out and condemned Chase Oliver and said, this is not our candidate. We don't support this and we won't vote for this guy. So that doesn't help him at all. But at the same time, he's also running against Donald Trump, who is intentionally going out of his way to, well, not really out of his way, but he's intentionally courting libertarians and trying to get libertarians to vote for him by promising to pardon or to commit the sentence of Ross Ulbricht. Between those two things, you ended up with this result, which is Chase Oliver getting a little over 600,000 votes, which is, on a national scale, that's really, really horrifying.
Okay, I was going to say national scale because there's no way that he got 600,000 in New Hampshire.
No, he got
We only have
600,000 across the entire
3 million
nation.
people in New Hampshire.
Yeah, but a result of 600,000, it represents about 0.4% of the entire population. For a little bit more perspective on that, other candidates, which includes people writing in Iron Man and Mickey Mouse and whatever, and your best friend or whatever, got 0.2% of the votes. So it's an absolutely abysmal performance by the Libertarian Party. But I don't think we can blame Chase Oliver or the Libertarian Party of the United States for this. I think it's largely the fault of Donald Trump and the fault of right-wingers in the Libertarian Party who are abrasive and who are upset about the fact that Chase Oliver is pro-LGBT in the middle of a culture war where that is considered abhorrent.
I would probably attribute it mostly to the maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I'm not on Twitter. I don't see what's going on there. But from my perspective, like I didn't even know the guy was gay. Well,
that's because you're not on social media.
Right,
it's been a big deal over there with several state affiliates saying we condemn this guy.
But I also suspect that like everybody knew about the Ross thing in the libertarian world. So
sure.
I feel like that's probably the more likely explanation as to how the
when all your friends come out and say no, we can't support this guy. He's a child groomer. I'm not at all surprised to see people saying, all right, well, I guess I'll vote for Trump then. There's more coming up on this because there's more results to go through. A lot of them are just fascinating me. Like Jill Stein got more than 3 times the number of votes that he did. 603-283-6160. There's more coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Hire.
Climate change is already here. People are suffering in the shadows, and they're crying out for leadership and action.
The COP29 Climate Summit is getting underway in Azerbaijan. The annual United Nations meeting will be attended by delegations from 200 countries. The United States' envoy insists the climate fight will continue under a Donald Trump presidency, despite his threats to dismantle environmental safeguards and remove the US from a key international agreement to stop burning fossil fuels. The leaders of France and the UK say they'll support Ukraine for as long as necessary to, quote, thwart Russia's war of aggression. President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer marked Armistice Day in Paris. Donald Trump claims he'd end the war in Ukraine in one day, without saying how. But Britain's Defence Secretary says the president-elect is right to push European nations to increase their own NATO defence spending. Simon Gaitan reports.
UK Secretary of State for Defence John Healey insisted he expects a Trump-led US would not turn away from NATO. Trump has previously criticised NATO and accused other member countries of not spending enough on the bloc in comparison with the US, and during the election campaign even threatened to only defend countries that met their defence spending obligations.
Russia is denying that Donald Trump spoke with President Vladimir Putin on the phone. Mitch McCann has the details.
The Washington Post reported on Sunday local time that Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin had spoken during the week, where Mr. Trump advised him not to escalate the war in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the story was, quote, completely untrue. President Putin had congratulated Donald Trump and said he showed courage during the assassination attempt on his life earlier this year.
Mr. Trump's appointed a hardline member of his first term to head up the mass deportation of illegal immigrants from the United States. He's also rewarding one of his closest political allies by proposing to send her to the United Nations as America's next ambassador. Here's Simon Marks.
Tom Homan is one of the most prominent far-right figures in Donald Trump's inner circle. Now, the former head of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Division of the U.S. government has been told by the president-elect that he will be America's new border czar, the man who will implement orders to deport potentially millions of people from the country. At the Republican convention in July, he made this pledge.
I got a message to the millions of illegal aliens that Joe Biden's releasing our country in violation of federal law. You better start packing now, because you're going home.
Soon he'll have the power and resources to make good on that promise. Another right-winger, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York, will become America's ambassador to the United Nations.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FS.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join the discussions. 603-283-6160 if you would like to do that. Again, the number is 603-283-6160. And last week, on Tuesday, actually, while the election was going on, and I left the hospital briefly to go and record the podcast with Nikki. It took about an hour, and I had to do a bunch of other things anyway at the house, like take my dog out and stuff, so it made sense to go ahead and stop by and record it. Anyway, we talked a lot about controlling one's emotions and getting a handle on them and not allowing them to cause one to freak out and go nuts. And this wasn't about the election, because the election was still ongoing, and we were just talking about this as a general good way to live. Then the election results happened and social media went crazy. Anyway, you can find this episode of the podcast at freetalkcast.com. It's also now on YouTube, it's on iTunes, Spotify, Alexa, all of the places where you would expect a podcast to be. You can find it there. That's freetalkcast.com. Nick and I sat down last week to talk about that. We're going to be sitting down this week probably to talk a little more about that and about the election results and just about the freakouts that I've been seeing on the internet from people. Like one guy said, I truly hope things aren't going to be as bad as I think they're going to get. Like, dude, stop this insane fear-mongering. Stop it. And he refused to see that he was fear-mongering, and like, this is normal. When a person is... I always think back to the 2016 clown sightings when I start thinking about hysteria and fear, because there were these, quote, clown sightings throughout the United States, and these clowns just appeared in places, never hurt anyone, never did anything, but people freaked the hell out. And it got to the point where people who performed their jobs as clowns, who were clowns as their careers, were being attacked in the streets. It also, we saw a lot of people creating hoaxes, finding pictures of clowns online and posting it and saying, oh, I saw this on this street, or I saw this clown over by this school. Schools were actually locked down simply because...
Are you serious?
I'm serious. Schools were actually put into lockdown because someone would call and say, I saw a clown nearby the school, and the school went into lockdown. This happened a lot in 2016.
No threat. Why would they close a school or lock down a school over a non-threat?
Because there was this widespread mass hysteria going on around these clowns who had never hurt anyone and who were just appearing and apparently creeping people out, allegedly. But there's no hard proof that any clown ever actually appeared anywhere. And no one ever talks about it anymore, so it makes me think, am I crazy? Did I imagine all of this?
I remember the clown stuff happening.
But yeah, it definitely happened.
I didn't know they actually locked schools down over it.
And clowns were attacked. It was not a good time to be a clown. And I know schools were locked down over it. I don't know how many schools, but I know I read about at least one. And the school that my nephew went to was locked down.
Wow.
And a lot of people were feeding into this fear of their friends and their family on social media, for that precious clout by saying, oh, I saw a clown, 3 streets over, causing their friends and family to freak out. And it spreads worse than any coronavirus or California wildfire could ever spread. People, for whatever reason, hysteria latches onto people and they can't see how hysterical they are. And we're seeing the same thing about the 2016 election results. And what's truly scary about this is that none of these people think they're fear-mongering. 2024 election results. None of these people think they're fear-mongering. None of them think they've jumped the shark and have gone crazy. If you ask any of them, they will say, no, look, I'm just being realistic. I'm just trying to warn people about the real threat. They genuinely believe the craziness they're saying. One of the people commented on one of my posts urging people, stop freaking out, just calm down and relax, take a deep breath, turn your television off, put your phone down and go outside. One of the people responded that they genuinely believe that Joe Biden, as a result of Donald Trump winning, is about to start World War III because he wants to tank the US dollar to leave Trump such a mess that he can't possibly fix it. And because of that, no one will ever vote for a Republican again. This guy genuinely believes that World War III is about to start because Joe Biden doesn't want Trump to win or doesn't want Republicans to win a future election. Like, dude, you have completely, you're not even drinking the Kool-Aid at that point. You're injecting it directly into your brain, and you need to stop. Unplug from the internet. Get off the television, put your phone down, go outside and live in the world with normal people who aren't crazy and who aren't shoving fear into your head. Because it's insidious. One person sees this post and they think, I wonder if that could happen. And they see someone else posting it and they start thinking, oh, well, there's some validity to this. And then there's social media, because social media, these kinds of posts are popular on there. They spread like wildfire. For whatever reason, they'll get hundreds of likes. While a person's standing there saying, hey guys, calm down. It's not that big a deal. We've literally had a Trump presidency before. So we have a really good idea of what to expect. We've been through this already. The world didn't end last time. Why do you think it's going to end this time? That post goes nowhere. But one person freaking out about how it's going to be the end of the world and how things are just going to be unbelievably bad, that goes viral. That gets all the eyeballs on it. And then other people start talking about how bad it's going to be. And the next thing you know, people are just fully hysterical.
See, the problem is, I'm looking at it from a different perspective. I think than most people, but to me, it's it's getting worse and worse and worse, no matter who we elect, or who is elected, right? And it's I think Trump probably won't be as bad as Harris, but then again, or if Harris was elected or had been elected, but again, it's one of these things where it's they do the same thing. It's Joe did the same thing Trump did. He literally reinstated tariffs that Trump instituted, and then Trump got rid of them before he left office. But then Joe literally reinstituted the same tariffs. It's like, if they've got the same policies, how can you really be? I mean, I understand being angry. I just don't understand being angry because of Trump getting elected when it's like they're doing the same thing.
Well, again, you're thinking about this in rational terms about results and what people are actually doing.
Yeah.
None of these people actually care about that. I saw one of these Democrats saying the real tragedy of this is that families are going to be separated at the border again. Dude, that never stopped.
No, it didn't.
Joe Biden never put a stop to that. He continued that exact same policy that began before the Trump era.
The Democrats literally said something about opening the border, and then when they got elected, they didn't change the policy, the border policy. And it's like, wait a minute, weren't you going to open the border? And it's like, oh no, I didn't mean that. Like
these Democrats don't care. In their heads, Joe Biden fix the immigration problem, and now that we have Trump back, families are going to go back to being separated at the border. The facts don't matter to this guy. He believes whatever he believes, and you cannot convince him otherwise. You cannot convince him that Joe Biden didn't stop separating families at the border. I want to make a quick correction. I previously said when we were going out to break that Jill Stein did 3 times better than Chase Oliver, and that's not true. She did better than Chase Oliver. I actually meant to say that Joe Jorgensen, who ran as the Libertarian Party candidate in 2020, did 3 times as good as Chase Oliver in 2024. In 2020, Joe Jorgensen got 1.8 million votes, about 1.1% of the vote, versus the 0.4% that Chase Oliver got and the 600,000. So she got about 3 times the number of votes that he did. Of course, prior to that, in the 2016 election, we saw Gary Johnson as the Libertarian Party candidate. And look, I can't stand Gary Johnson. He's just another washed-up Republican who joined the Libertarian Party because he was tired of being a little fish in a big sea, and he wanted to be a big fish in a smaller sea. He still got 3.2% of the vote in 2016. It was the best performance I'd ever seen from libertarians. And I still think we would have done better if we had nominated John McAfee or Vermin Supreme, but that's not how things went. People chose, Gary Johnson, and he did good. He got 3%, and that's the most they've ever gotten. And of course, Jill Stein continued with about 1% of the vote in that particular election as well. Going back to 2012, things are a little bit worse. Gary Johnson, again, 1%. So that seems to be more or less the baseline, and about 3 times what the Green Party gets. The Green Party in 2012 got 0.3% of the votes. I don't want to keep throwing numbers at people, but the important takeaway is that the Libertarian Party consistently does 3 times as well as the Green Party. And the other parties, the Constitution Party, the Justice Party, the Socialism and Liberation parties, they are negligible. Between all of them, between all of the other third parties, like the Constitution Party, the Justice Party, and so on, they don't even add up to Jill Stein's results. Okay, so they're negligible. You've got 2 main third parties in the United States, the Libertarian Party and the Green Party. And between those two, there's no contest whatsoever. The Libertarian Party is easily 3 times as successful as the Green Party across the board in 2016, in 2012, and in 2020. In fact, in 2020, they actually did not run Jill Stein. The Green Party ran Howie Hawkins, and Joe Jorgensen did almost 5 times as well as this particular person, who managed to only get about 400,000 votes. And again, I don't want to keep throwing numbers at people because their eyes will glaze over and they'll stop paying attention. But the important takeaway is that the Libertarian Party does a lot better than any of the other third-party candidates or any of the other independent candidates. And that's been historically true going back to 2020, 2016, 2012. And I'm willing to bet if I continued looking at the results going all the way back to probably the 1980s, that would be consistently true. However, in this last election, the result of the Libertarian Party was noticeably worse than any other time in history. Not only did it not get 3 times what the Green Party did. Chase Oliver got fewer votes entirely than the Green Party. The performance was abysmal. And again, I don't blame Chase Oliver for this. I blame 2 main things, and we're disagreeing about this. And that I looked online for the statement that the Libertarian Party released, because they released an actual press statement about Chase Oliver not being their candidate and how they won't support Chase Oliver. And they were followed up by, I think, the Libertarian Party of Michigan and a few other state affiliates. There's no list to my knowledge, but I couldn't find the statement. What I did find were a lot of tweets from Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, such as this one from September 22nd. Chase Oliver should be called a faggot for the rest of his life. Not because he's gay, but because he is sneaky, manipulative, and dishonest.
So sounds like a typical politician.
You can't claim to be interested in dialogue and understanding while refusing to talk to anyone intelligent who disagrees. Now, I don't know if any of that is true or not. However, I will say that having one of your state affiliates openly calling your candidate a faggot on Twitter is not going to help that candidate secure votes.
Yeah, you have to really wonder what the ultimate underlying goal was of a lot of these things that I guess Jeremy Kauffman has been doing here over the last year or so, because it definitely doesn't seem like libertarian to me at all.
Chase Oliver cannot come on Tim Pool, who is not a libertarian. And they also, I think they spelled Tim Pool wrong. I feel like he's got it. No, he doesn't have an E on the end of it. Anyway, because he has some cruising to do. Libertarians believe in the right to personal choices. Chase Oliver would rather go to a gay parade than spread the libertarian message to 100,000 people. And they go on like that. Brad Palumbo, they took a screenshot of him supporting Chase Oliver, and they said, Brad Palumbo is a gay man attracted to underage boys. So his support for Chase Oliver makes perfect sense. That was November the 5th. I think that was the actual election day, if I recall correctly. And like all of these things, and again, the Libertarian Party is just the most crass of them. The Libertarian Party of New Hampshire is simply the most crass of them, because it's got Jeremy Kauffman there tweeting things that honestly he should think about saying and, shut the F up, but he doesn't. Other state affiliates, though, are still doing it, just not quite as extreme. And it wasn't all state affiliates, certainly, but it was a lot of them. It was enough that it hurt the Libertarian Party. It was a lot of division, a lot of senseless infighting, extremely similar to when Nick Sarwark came to New Hampshire and attempted to create division within the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. We see something almost identical playing out here on the national scale, with state affiliates now just bickering amongst themselves and amongst the candidates because they don't like who the candidate happens to be. It benefits no one. It helps no one. It achieves nothing. And it just makes the Libertarian Party look like a complete joke.
I mean, that's assuming that the people are actually working on behalf of the Libertarian Party, as opposed to attempting to undermine it. I mean, this is the thing.
Well, they are undermining it. That's a statement of fact. Look, if I'm trying to support a candidate, if I'm trying to support the Green Party candidate, and I look online and half of the people from the Green Party that I see are just talking about why she's a horrible person, how could I possibly make up my mind to support them when their own political party doesn't? It's a bad look.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the difference between libertarians in quotes and philosophically libertarian.
Yeah, and look, obviously, these people can tweet whatever they want. I'd rather they do it from their personal Twitters instead of hijacking the LPNH Twitter in order to do these things. But yes, they are 100% within their rights, even from the state political party, to do this sorts of thing.
Yeah. The thing that I noticed was a lot of the things that are coming out of Jeremy's mouth are very much the things that the left was pushing. that just didn't make sense a number of years ago.
What do you mean?
Like the racist kind of homophobia kind of angle.
When the left was accusing libertarians of being racist and homophobic.
And I looked to my right, and I looked to my left. There were more gay people at, like, there was a in Keene, there was a speech that the libertarians showed up to, and we had more gay people than they did. I mean, it was like, and they're attacking us for being like homophobic or whatever, and it's like, no, that's the Republicans, not the libertarians. And then it's like, and now it's like all of a sudden, like, there's people saying in so-called libertarians saying it. Like, I don't know. I'm skeptical because that's not what I see around me.
Excellent point. So it's been a weird election, and I don't know what to make of all of it. However, the price of Bitcoin has been going crazy since Tuesday night. Since it became clear that Donald Trump was going to win the election, Bitcoin has been going up. And I don't think it has really stopped going up. The last time I looked, it was at like 86,000 or something to that effect.
I saw it at 80,000 like earlier, but
I pulled up a Bitcoin ticker widget that I have, and right now it's at 88,300, and it peaked at 89,000, and it's gonna hit 100,000 within the next few days.
You think?
Yeah, almost certainly. And there's a lot of resistance at that price point, so I think it might fall a bit, or it may take it a while to climb much further than that. But it could also just skyrocket past that because, that's the next big plateau that's going to be really meaningful to a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, it's 10,000 points away, and it's climbed $10,000 to $15,000 in the last week. I absolutely think it's going to break 100,000 before the end of the week. And a lot of this is because, like, I don't want to support Donald Trump and I don't want to like Donald Trump, but he is friendly-ish to cryptocurrency. He has made some sort of statement about Gary Gensler being out of control and needing to be reined in. The Donald Trump campaign accepted Bitcoin as a donation. And I would highly advise against anyone giving their Bitcoin or any of their cryptocurrencies to a politician, unless it's a libertarian. Now, obviously, Libertarian Party candidates have accepted cryptocurrency as payment since cryptocurrency began, and they've accepted gold as payment. But having a mainstream, one of the main party candidates accepting cryptocurrency donations, that was a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
That was a really big deal. Donald Trump, I mean, Melania has been out there. It may be his daughter. I don't know which one is his wife and which one is his daughter because I don't care. But anyway, his daughter has been out there shilling for one of the tokens, a Solana, I believe it was. She was paid to promote them or whatever, which obviously doesn't mean she supports it, but it's an industry that Donald Trump knows about and he's interested in and he's relatively friendly toward. Versus what we've seen over the last 4 years under the Biden administration, which is the SEC just being absolutely out of control. The prosecution of the Crypto 6, the raid against the Crypto 6, happened under the Biden administration. In fact, within months of Joe Biden taking office. And I don't think those two things are actually related. I don't think Joe Biden had anything to do with the raid on the Crypto 6. Not directly, but a friendlier regulatory environment. One where Bitcoin wasn't seen as a crime could have prevented something like that from happening.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, ultimately, I think it comes down to was it Patrick, the one FBI agent that's been terrorizing or trying to terrorize libertarians in New Hampshire for decades.
Sure.
And it's I don't know. I think they may have utilized it under Joe to actually come after the Crypto 6, but I have to wonder how much of it really was, Joe versus somebody who was already in the FBI taking advantage of it.
Well, at the end of the day, what Ian and I were charged with by operating an unlicensed money transmitting business is selling Bitcoin, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Distributing Bitcoin among the masses. I was found guilty of operating an unlicensed money transmitting business. I was found guilty of selling Bitcoin. That's it. That's the entire charge that I was convicted and put in prison for. I find it really hard to think that Donald Trump, who accepts cryptocurrency as payment as payment donations to his campaign, would create the same sort of environment that allows the selling of Bitcoin to be considered a crime. And not to say that the president has
Yeah.
any real control over that, but he does appoint people to head various agencies.
I feel like I wouldn't get my hopes up too much in that. I mean, if you look at like his campaign, they made you jump through hoops, a ton of different hoops in order to send them cryptocurrency.
I did not look into that.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
did.
surprised. Campaign financing laws are pretty intense.
Yeah, and I was about to say that I wouldn't necessarily assume that the reason is because, you know, he supports, you know, the campaign financing laws or,
Well, he
you know,
has
KYC
to
or
follow
any of
those.
that.
I mean, he's been in trouble
So-
for campaign financing stuff in the past.
Yes, yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily assume it, but at the same time, I'm also how would I say this? I'm hopeful, but like, you know, the left and the right, they're so similar.
They are, but Donald Trump is a little bit different from what I would consider to be your typical Republican. He is a
Yeah.
politician and he is a lying, filthy, disgusting snake.
Yep.
But he is a lying, filthy, disgusting snake in a slightly different way than like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. And
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that, but in that there is some ambiguity and some uncertainty about what he may or may not do.
Yeah.
And he's certainly no libertarian.
No.
He's not into cryptocurrency because he wants to free us from the clutches of the Federal Reserve Bank.
I mean,
he's not Satoshi Nakamoto, and he's not into Bitcoin for the right reasons.
So Trump did attack cryptocurrency and Bitcoin
He did.
Years ago, and now both of his kids are into it. Cryptocurrency, they're involved in cryptocurrency in one way or another. And he seems to be less, especially with the money coming in from the Bitcoin crowd or the cryptocurrency crowd. He does seem to have toned down the rhetoric and, you know, somehow got involved in the cryptocurrency industry itself too.
I presume his kids have changed his mind on it, which is not terribly unusual. Like if my grandmother was my grandmother's too old to really care because she's like 90 something years old. But if she was interested in cryptocurrency and was just heavily against it because of whatever reason, I think I would be able to persuade her to not be against it. And I suspect that same sort of thing happened here, but I don't know that.
I suspect it had nothing to do with whether they like cryptocurrency or don't dislike cryptocurrency, or Trump does or doesn't, or his kids do or don't. I think it's probably more likely that somebody, talked them into some sort of business deal.
Sure. Yeah, it's all business to them, no doubt.
Right. It's completely business transaction from their perspective.
But if you're in the business of Bitcoin, and your dad is out there telling people that cryptocurrency is evil, then I would imagine that you're going to pull your dad aside and be like, hey, look, I'm in this business. I want to go over it with you and explain to you why it's a good thing. But they're in it entirely for making money for the business perspective. To be absolutely clear, they don't care anything about financial privacy or protecting your rights to financial privacy or taking on the Federal Reserve or auditing or ending the Fed. They don't care about any of that.
Completely different from why we support it.
Yes. But it is good when the devil works toward the same goal that I'm working for in one very narrow area.
Yep.
I'm okay with it, right? And that's more or less what is going on here. There is more coming up here, including Chinese government spying on Trump.
You can't win if you don't enter, and you actually can improve your chances of winning a prize drawing if you wrinkle up your entry blank. I'm Holland Cook from survivalspeech.com, and I speak from experience. Why this works: if they'll be spinning the drum before drawing, your entry blank will move around more than, and not adhere to, other perfectly flat entry blanks. And if they don't spin the drum and merely reach into a box full of other perfectly flat entry blanks, many of which are sticking together, yours will feel different to the person reaching in. When you win, act surprised. And if you're looking for work, this is a metaphor. For more tips on sticking out in a world where just too much blends into the blah, 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 hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
How many lawyers does it take to change a light bulb? None. They'd rather keep their clients in the dark. There are too many lawyer jokes to count. However, there are some lawyers with more noble intentions. At the Institute for Justice, we bring the light to our clients. We are a non-profit public interest law firm with clear values and principles. At IJ, we fight for those whose most basic rights are denied by the government. Visit our website today at ij.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Hire.
Climate change is already here. People are suffering in the shadows, and they're crying out for leadership and action.
The COP29 Climate Summit is getting underway in Azerbaijan. The annual United Nations meeting will be attended by delegations from 200 countries. The United States' envoy insists the climate fight will continue under a Donald Trump presidency, despite his threats to dismantle environmental safeguards and remove the US from a key international agreement to stop burning fossil fuels. The leaders of France and the UK say they'll support Ukraine for as long as necessary to, quote, thwart Russia's war of aggression. President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer marked Armistice Day in Paris. Donald Trump claims he'd end the war in Ukraine in one day, without saying how. But Britain's Defence Secretary says the President-elect is right to push European nations to increase their own NATO defence spending. Simon Gaitan reports.
UK Secretary of State for Defence John Healey insisted he expects a Trump-led US would not turn away from NATO. Trump has previously criticised NATO and accused other member countries of not spending enough on the bloc in comparison with the US, and during the election campaign even threatened to only defend countries that met their defence spending obligations.
Russia is denying that Donald Trump spoke with President Vladimir Putin on the phone. Mitch McCann has the details.
The Washington Post reported on Sunday local time that Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin had spoken during the week, where Mr. Trump advised him not to escalate the war in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the story was, quote, completely untrue. President Putin had congratulated Donald Trump and said he showed courage during the assassination attempt on his life earlier this year.
Mr. Trump's appointed a hardline member of his first term to head up the mass deportation of illegal immigrants from the United States. He's also rewarding one of his closest political allies by proposing to send her to the United Nations as America's next ambassador. Here's Simon Marks.
Tom Homan is one of the most prominent far-right figures in Donald Trump's inner circle. Now the former head of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Division of the US government has been told by the president-elect that he will be America's new border czar, the man who will implement orders to deport potentially millions of people from the country. At the Republican convention in July, he made this pledge.
I got a message to the millions of illegal aliens that Joe Biden's releasing our country in violation of federal law. You better start packing now, because you're going home.
Soon he'll have the power and resources to make good on that promise. Another right-winger, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York, will become America's ambassador to the United Nations.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at what Donald Trump's big election win might mean for the two biggest foreign policy crises on the world stage. As you know, the president-elect has vowed to resolve the war in Gaza and the war in Ukraine on day one of his presidency. But what does that look like? Sam Kiley is a veteran broadcaster and writer specialising in international affairs.
On the one hand, you've got his fulsome support for Netanyahu, and then on the other, his suggestion that even before he takes office, he might be able to bring peace to Ukraine. That would only come if there is a commitment handing over the Donbass plus a huge chunk of the east of the country to permanent Russian sovereignty, and that's something that the Zelensky's ruled out. But let's not forget the Europeans also ruled that out. Macron saying at that gathering, the European political gathering of leadership, saying essentially that the EU in the wake of the Trump administration is going to have to start paying a lot more if it perceives the threat to be what it says it is.
Much of this, of course, will be determined by the composition of Trump's new foreign policy team. It could include his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, in an unofficial position focused on the Middle East, with the Ukraine negotiations to be handled by his Secretary of State, possibly the extreme right Rick Grinnell, who served as Trump's ambassador to Germany first time around. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
Our top stories again. The COP29 climate summit is getting underway in Azerbaijan. The annual United Nations meeting will be attended by delegations from 200 countries. The leaders of France and the UK say they'll support Ukraine for as long as necessary to, quote, thwart Russia's war of aggression. President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer marked Armistice Day in Paris. This as Russia denies that Donald Trump spoke with President Vladimir Putin on the phone. That's the latest feature story news. I'm Benji Haya in Washington.
Saying that a few images of displaced refugees would probably do the trick, Americans admitted this week that they could probably be talked into another war. Citizens nationwide told reporters that if they were to see a blurry satellite image of potential nuclear weapons or footage of an evil militant group, they could easily see themselves getting on board with another major military effort.
I'm not saying I'd be gung-ho about it right away, but if they called it something like a concentrated military operation or something other than war at first, I could see myself warming up to the idea. Honestly, just hearing a top official on TV say something like patriotic duty might clinch it.
And in this week's op-ed pages, an area man finds it's just his luck to lose thousands at the blackjack tables every night for the past few weeks. In other news, a senator tries submitting a rejected bill to the Canadian Parliament. What mom would have wanted is evolving over the course of funeral planning. And a new report finds you're actually saving money with a Franklin Skate Center roller rink membership.
This is the Onion News Network.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. You can take control of the airwaves, talk about whatever is important to you. 603-283-6160 if you want to do that. Again, the number is 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, it's Aria.
And Mr. Penguin.
And we've been talking a lot about Bitcoin. Of course, it's up to above $80,000. It's close to about $90,000 right now for the first time ever, breaking new all-time highs every day this week. And it's pretty much a result of the presidential election. I mean, as far as I can tell, there may be other things going on. There's undoubtedly other things going on, but the anticipated changes to the hostile nature of the government toward cryptocurrency is what is driving this increase in value to cryptocurrencies across the board. It's not just Bitcoin. A bunch of them are up. Dogecoin is up. Shiba Inu is up. ADA is up. Just about every cryptocurrency that you could name is up significantly throughout the past week. And you may be wondering, what do you do with your cryptocurrency once you have it? Well, the first thing you need to do, the most important thing to do, is to get it into a wallet that you actually control. And that's where the Edge wallet comes in. You can find out more about it at edge.app. That's edge.app. It's a unique wallet with an actual sign-in system allowing you to log in with a username and password, which is rare for these sorts of wallets that actually allow you to control your cryptocurrency. And after that, you can log in with a 4-digit PIN that you create, so you don't have to enter your password every single time. But it does host, or it does hold, I suppose, most of the cryptocurrencies that you might be interested in. Like Dogecoin is on there, Monero's on there, Bitcoin is on there. It's a multi-crypto wallet, obviously. And this has a lot of utility for people. You don't have to have one particular wallet for your Bitcoin, one particular wallet for your Bitcoin Cash, one for your Monero. You might want to still have a dedicated wallet for your Monero because Monero hard forks fairly regularly. And when that happens, it breaks every wallet across the board. And the Monero wallet called Cake, the official Monero wallet, is always the first one to be fixed again. So you might want to actually have your Monero in your Cake wallet. But for every other cryptocurrency, a multi-crypto wallet works just fine. And Edge.app is one such wallet. Check it out at Edge.app. It's important for you to maintain control of your cryptocurrency. And the Edge wallet helps to facilitate that. Find out more about it at edge.app. That's edge.app. And it's a good time to learn about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. Of course, last night, as I was giving a coworker home a ride home from work, he asked me about Bitcoin and, whether or not it's too late to get into it. And I was like, well, of course not. It's never too late. And he was
This is like asking if it's too late to get into the dollar or the euro or, something else. It's like, it's something that you use. It's not, anytime is a good time.
But it's the exact same thing that I've heard from people for 10 years now. I wish I'd gotten into it sooner.
It's because people are looking to make money off of it. Like, that's all they care about. And it's kind of sad because
that's not sad at all. That's an important thing. In a world where most people are living paycheck to paycheck and drowning in debt, I want them to be able to use a currency that is increasing in value, and that just by holding on to it, it makes them money.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want people to lose their value, which is what you do when you hold dollars, right? Like, but I don't know, like it's one of these things where it's like I wish people would use it because it protects them, not because it's this thing it's just some other investment view.
Well, it protects them in many ways, and one of the ways that it helps to protect them is to help them financially. It
does absolutely
give them financial security.
It gives them control over their money. If you have it in a bank,
but they don't care about that. They don't have money to be in control of, right? And that's where you and I diverge from a lot of these people, because I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. There have been plenty of times in my life where I did, but I'm not living paycheck to paycheck right now. And a lot of people are. Like something like 66% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. They don't have any extra money to put into Bitcoin. And I understand it feels meaningless to take $10 a week and use it to buy Bitcoin. You're like, that's never going to add up. That's going to give me what, 0.00001 of a Bitcoin? Yeah, probably. But keep doing it.
Yeah.
Do it every week.
I mean, you got to get your finances under control first before you're going to be able to have money.
A lot of people live in a situation where that's simply not possible. Like the average rent here in Keene is like $1,600 a month for a one-bedroom apartment.
I get that. I don't know. Like there's so many times where I see people say, well, they say that, but then it's like I take a look at people who I've known who've gone without cell phones and like they've done without things, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I get it.
Well, yeah, anyone could live in austerity and save money, right? But at that point, they're not really living.
Well, but the point is it would give somebody an opportunity to save up and then stop losing money every week.
I think there's a balance between living comfortably and not overspending that most people could reach. And I think that people probably do tend to overspend, and they could cut down a bit on their expenses. But I don't think that's what's fundamentally the issue in the American economy. I don't think we can tell people to just stop buying Starbucks and they're going to suddenly stop living paycheck to paycheck. I think the expenses involved here, the electricity bills, the gas bills, the grocery bills in particular, and the cost of rent are such that even if they cut out all of these luxuries, they're not going to have very much left over, if anything. And then many of them have children. You and I are also fortunate not to have children.
Sure.
Children are extremely expensive.
Again, I mean, I think about what my parents did. My parents' generation and their parents' generation were even more, frugal, and
they lived in a very different economic climate.
They did, but at the same time, it's like they didn't buy toys left and right for their kids. Their kids had jobs. They had paper routes. They would like there's
some
all
of them
these
certainly.
Things. There's all these things, certainly if we go back far enough.
But the economic climate, I think, is the biggest factor here, because like right now, the cost of rent and groceries, it wildly outstrips the price increase, the wage increases that we've seen over the last several decades. The fact is that people working today simply don't make the same amount of money relative to their expenses that your parents made, and certainly not that our grandparents made.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly, I think, right about that in terms of the the dollar's decline and the cost of living increases. But I don't know. It's like it still seems to me like we're we've got the dollar goes farther, and yet somehow we should be not as bad off.
The dollar goes significantly less far.
It doesn't go as far, but it goes farther. Okay, so let me rephrase this.
The dollar has wildly decreased in value over the last several decades.
No, you're right. So you're right. So the dollar doesn't go as far on certain classes of item in particular.
It doesn't. I mean, on everything across the board.
Well, I mean, not if you look at like televisions and electronics. I mean, the costs have gone down drastically from the 1980s and earlier. I mean, you used to pay $5,000 for a television, right?
Okay.
So I guess
the cost of some goods has gone down.
So anyway, my only point that I'm making is that there are a lot of places that people could cut down on, and I don't think that people are, for the most part.
I don't think that people should have to cut down when we live in the wealthiest nation on the planet.
That's true, but this is certainly true, and I'm not arguing that people should have to cut down. I
think if the Fed hadn't destroyed the U.S. dollar, that people wouldn't have to cut down, and that we would all be living
completely
like
agree
kings
with you
and
on
queens.
that point. But I don't know. It's also the same time. I feel like a lot of the people who are saying, living paycheck to paycheck, it's not just a issue of the dollar decline in value.
No, it's certainly not. It is a fact that they are spending more than they earn, and they could reduce some of their expenses in general.
It's not just our personal expenses; it's also government expenses, right? Like it's something like 20 times. We're spending 20 times even when you account for inflation, we're spending something like 20 times what it would cost to send a kid to a government school in the 1960s. That's insane.
Yeah, and education has only gotten worse. Anyway, the point of all of this that I was trying to say was that you may not have much that you can put into Bitcoin, and it may feel pointless to put $10 into Bitcoin. Yeah, if you had done that in 2010, you would have gotten a whole lot more Bitcoin than you would if you did it right now. But look, I'm telling you from experience and from seeing this over the last 10 years, if you do it now, then you won't be saying 10 years from now that you wish you had bought Bitcoin sooner. And that is something that people continue to say, even though every time they say it, I tell them, buy it now, right? It's going to keep going up. Do I know that for a fact? No. But I've got a lot of history of Bitcoin going up at this point. Yeah, it goes down here and there. It fluctuates, certainly, but it definitely trends upward over time.
Yep.
And that's a pretty clear trend.
That's what people don't seem to understand. This is what drives me nuts by people saying it's unstable. It's like, yeah, kind of, but over the long haul, it goes up. Like you would be really hard pressed to lose money if you're, using it all the time, right?
Well, in economic terms, you don't want a stable currency. You want one that does go up in value over time because that encourages people to hold on to it and to generate savings. But right now, if you're taking $10 and you're putting it under your mattress each week and you're just leaving it there and saving money that way, you're losing.
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
idea.
You're losing money over time because today that $10 bill buys just ever so slightly more than it will tomorrow. And 2 years from now, that will be especially clear where a gallon of milk at the grocery store is now costing like $4 or $5, whereas just a few years ago it was $2 or $3. The price of goods have gone up relative to the USD. It takes more dollars to buy now things that you could have bought a few years ago for fewer numbers of dollars. So don't just take that $10 and put it down there. Use it to buy Bitcoin and then hold on to it because that becomes more valuable over time. It's in economic terms, having a dollar that goes down over time, that becomes worth less over time, encourages people to spend it, to get rid of it as fast as possible, to get anything else except
and that's by
that
design.
dollar.
They want you to spend those dollars. But
they do, because Keynesian economics tells them that spending stimulates the economy.
What wealthy people do is they don't spend the dollars, they invest the dollars. And it doesn't matter what you invested in as long as it's going up over the long haul.
Yeah, and just about everything does.
Yeah.
And you can use the Acorns app to do this automatically. Connect it to your bank account. And every time you make a debit card purchase, it will round up. If your purchase was $4.56, it will round it up to $5 and it will take that 44 cents and it will move it off to the side and it will automatically buy some stocks for you when it reaches a certain amount.
The way I look at cryptocurrency is it's the lazy way not to lose money because you don't have to think about it.
Well, you don't have to think about things like Acorns either. And there's so many options out there that exist for people where you won't notice your transactions being rounded up in order to buy stocks. You won't notice that. Over the long run, yeah, you may realize, oh wow, I spent $200 this year on stocks. Wow, I didn't know that. But it's relatively easy to set up any of these things to automatically take $15 out of your paycheck each month and use it to buy stocks and bonds and dividends and stuff. And there's tons of apps that make and services that make that possible.
I feel like that might be a useful tool to invest, but I don't necessarily know that that's the. It's a different, like, I feel like cryptocurrency is kind of a different arena, a different
it is. It's
part
meant
of
to
your
be
portfolio,
a currency,
right?
It's not meant to be an investment,
right? So like I would rather people pay me with cryptocurrency as an example, and I'll hold the cryptocurrency until I go to spend it, right, or need to spend it, rather than dollars, and then I'll over time I'll end up doing better than if I just held dollars, because the value won't have been lost, but at the same time I don't not make other investments. I make other investments as well. Well,
cryptocurrency is certainly not meant to be an investment. That's not what it was designed for. But to the average person, it is. And that's all they think about it as, is an investment. So we have to speak to them in terms that they understand.
I feel like cryptocurrency, though, especially for somebody who lives paycheck to paycheck, is going to be way easier to get into than stocks or other types of investment, because at least if they need to spend it, they can spend it, right? And it's not as easy.
Well, in some
to
cases
do with stocks,
but I mean, it's not easy to you and I. It's easy to use cryptocurrency, but we literally watched people at PorkFest a few years ago trying to use Bitcoin to make a purchase, and they didn't know how to do it.
A lot of times people haven't.
And these were Bitcoin experts who were speaking on a panel about Bitcoin.
I'll put experts in quotes here, but I think a lot of times
I'm just saying it's simple for you and I because we are steeped in it and we've lived the technology.
We use it.
Yes,
I mean,
but that's not the case for the vast majority of people.
I understand that, but that's the kind of the point. Like, if you start using it, it's not that hard, and if people actually use it, then you're going to end up doing better off.
Certainly. But I would suggest that people hold on to it. Don't get cryptocurrency and immediately spend it. All right, you need to generate some savings. You need to generate some actual wealth.
I would use it personally. I think you can always replenish.
You can buy more of it.
You can always replenish it.
We're talking about people who live paycheck to paycheck, Chris. You're not the average person living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, but you have to understand it and be able to use it. And
what good does it do these people? To these people, it's not a cryptocurrency, right? It's not a currency. They're not getting into it because they want to take down the Fed. They're broke, man. They live paycheck to paycheck, and they need to make a buck. That's all there is to it. You can sigh about it, but that's the way that 2/3 of Americans live.
If they're living paycheck to paycheck, they're going to need to spend it. So I don't know.
No, they have the self-restraint where they could handle putting $5 or $10 a week back. They could.
I feel like you're kind of arguing it from like.
And I think one of the benefits of doing
two different sides here.
I think one of the benefits of doing this is that Bitcoin is harder for them to spend. Stocks are harder for them to spend. There's a 5 to 7 delay, 5 to 7 day delay.
Is it?
If you want to sell, well, it depends on the service that you're using.
Okay.
If you're buying and selling directly, it probably settles that day or whatever. But if you're using a service like Acorns or what is the other one, Robinhood, it probably takes longer than that.
I know things have changed a bit in the investment world as far as like stocks are concerned. Like, I know back in the day, like, you'd pay a fortune to you pay like, I don't know, maybe like $5 or $10 or whatever it was to get into a stock or something like that. And so getting into and out of it was expensive.
That doesn't appear to be the case now. I think things like Acorns and Robinhood
is the one I'm thinking of.
I think they've gotten rid of that.
They got rid of that. I don't know what the time frame is still, though, relative to like withdrawing.
But yeah, like Scottrade and things like that, the early runners of things that allowed the average person to buy stocks like Scottrade and E-Trade, there was like an $8 transaction fee every time you wanted to buy or sell a stock. Yeah. And those things didn't persist into the Robinhood and Acorns era of apps.
Oh, interesting.
Which is what allows people to buy the penny stocks like GameStop.
I just assumed
a ton of money off them.
Those traditional apps were still charging, but I guess
they probably are.
Oh, okay.
But there's newer ones that don't, like Acorns and Robinhood, and presumably they're better. I don't really know what the difference is. I used to use E-Trade back in the day, but of course then Robinhood and Acorns came along, and I found them to be significantly better. Just new, innovative solutions to the same problems that have always existed. But I think the average person is going to have a difficult time. I think if I went to one of my coworkers and I said, I want to give you 1 Bitcoin, and I just gave them a Bitcoin, I don't think maybe 2 people there could figure out how to spend it. Maybe 2 out of about 30 employees. And those would be the younger college age ones who are generally more tech savvy anyway. But I think most people would just be like, I don't know how to do it. But they could handle installing Coinbase. And look, Coinbase is the devil. I get it. They're evil. But you got to buy a Bitcoin somewhere. And for you, the average person, that's probably the easiest route to go about doing it. You know, buy some Bitcoin on Coinbase or Kraken or Crypto.com or Gemini or whatever cryptocurrency exchanges out there. Move it into a private wallet. Find some guides online how to do that. Ask a friend who's into cryptocurrency how to go about doing this. Get them to show you so that you don't make any mistakes and accidentally send it into the ether to disappear forever. And then just hold on to it. Because you're going to be here 10 years from now saying that you wish you had bought Bitcoin back when it was only $90,000 per Bitcoin. And I know that because you're saying it now about $9,000 per Bitcoin, and you were saying it 10 years ago about $9 per Bitcoin. Like the guy I gave a ride home to is like, I had the opportunity back when it was $10. I instead of taking this $2,000 I had and buying a truck, I should have invested in Bitcoin. I should have bought Bitcoin. Well, yeah. So do it now so that you're not saying this again in 10 years. That argument, though, it falls on completely deaf ears. He didn't go home and buy Bitcoin. He's not going to buy Bitcoin this week or next week. And he's going to look up 10 years from now going, I wish I had bought Bitcoin back when Aria gave me a ride home from work and told me to buy Bitcoin. Because like the trajectory is clear at this point. In fact, every year on this day, on November the 11th, there is a memory that pops up in one of my social media networks where it tells you the value of Bitcoin on November the 11th on that particular year. And one year it's $3, the next year it's $12, and the next year it's $280 or whatever. And year after year after year, the number is just bigger. And this year, that number is $89,000.
I want to back up and just say it may not be bigger every single year. Sometimes you may go down.
It's
but
bigger than the
over
previous
time, it's
year. And so far, that's been true.
If it's been like 2-3 years where you might have to wait in some instances.
That's true. The meme itself that I have, the graphic, it does end in 2020. And 21 and 22 and 23 were a little rough years for Bitcoin, so they may have actually been lower.
Yeah. I just want to point out that like don't sell it because you see it drop in half its value or something like that.
Oh yeah.
It's just hold on to it. That's the time. That's when you want to be buying more, not when you want to be selling it and getting out.
Certainly, people look at the number of Bitcoin as it's currently at, and they're like, "Oh, I lost money," but no, you didn't lose money until you sold it.
You only lost money. Yeah, you only lose money when you sell it when it's low.
And quick correction, the graphic I have is for November the 6th. So it's not the November the 11th as I thought it was. Anyway, for those curious, the price of Bitcoin on November the 6th of various years, 2011, $3. 2012, $11. 2013, $258. Then $341, then $388, then $705, then $7,300. Then 6,514. So it actually did go down.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Like, in a couple years, it actually went down. Like, it was like half as much as it was the year before. But if you look at
nothing that drastic on here, but probably in 21 and 22, something that drastic happened.
Yeah.
But in 2019, it went back up to $9,000. 2020, $15,515, and now 2024, $89,000. What are you waiting on, man? Are you really telling me that you're going to be sitting here a few years from now saying, I wish I had bought Bitcoin back when it was $90,000? Because you will be if you don't move on it and acquire some Bitcoin now. And then, as Chris pointed out, hold on to it. Don't sell it when it starts to go down. It's going to go down at points, and it's going to go up over time. That seems to be the clear trajectory. Maybe Bitcoin dies tomorrow. I don't know. I can't predict the future. And this is not financial advice. But if you're one of those people who has been saying, I wish I had bought Bitcoin back when it was worth X, go ahead and do it today. Stop waiting. Stop putting it off. Buy it now. No, it's not going to multiply by a factor of 10,000% like it used to, but it might. Seems unlikely, but it might. And even so, even if it only goes up a little bit, you're still doing better than you would if you just let it sit there in dollars. There is more coming up about the Chinese spying on Donald Trump. It is Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live.
The amount of young people being brought up on criminal charges, sex offender charges, for taking nude photos of themselves and putting them online. It's just so sad to see these people having their lives just rolled right over the top of by these prosecutors that want to make it look like they're doing something good, but they're not doing anything that's helping anyone. There's no victim in this case. When you hear the term child pornography, what should come to mind, if anything, should be the idea of forcing children into sexual scenes and videotaping or photographing
adults
them.
Forcing children or somebody.
Even if it's a child forcing another child, I think the force is the issue there. If you're talking about a 15-year-old girl voluntarily choosing to take a nude photo of herself to send to her boyfriend or to post online, no one forced her to do that.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern at freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Hire.
Climate change is already here. People are suffering in the shadows, and they're crying out for leadership and action.
The COP29 Climate Summit is getting underway in Azerbaijan. The annual United Nations meeting will be attended by delegations from 200 countries. The United States' envoy insists the climate fight will continue under a Donald Trump presidency, despite his threats to dismantle environmental safeguards and remove the US from a key international agreement to stop burning fossil fuels. The leaders of France and the UK say they'll support Ukraine for as long as necessary to, quote, thwart Russia's war of aggression. President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer marked Armistice Day in Paris. Donald Trump claims he'd end the war in Ukraine in one day, without saying how. But Britain's Defence Secretary says the president-elect is right to push European nations to increase their own NATO defence spending. Simon Gaitan reports.
UK Secretary of State for Defence John Healey insisted he expects a Trump-led US would not turn away from NATO. Trump has previously criticised NATO and accused other member countries of not spending enough on the bloc in comparison with the US, and during the election campaign even threatened to only defend countries that met their defence spending obligations.
Russia is denying that Donald Trump spoke with President Vladimir Putin on the phone. Mitch McCann has the details.
The Washington Post reported on Sunday local time that Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin had spoken during the week, where Mr. Trump advised him not to escalate the war in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the story was, quote, completely untrue. President Putin had congratulated Donald Trump and said he showed courage during the assassination attempt on his life earlier this year.
Mr. Trump's appointed a hardline member of his first term to head up the mass deportation of illegal immigrants from the United States. He's also rewarding one of his closest political allies by proposing to send her to the United Nations as America's next ambassador. Here's Simon Marks.
Tom Homan is one of the most prominent far-right figures in Donald Trump's inner circle. Now, the former head of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Division of the US government has been told by the president-elect that he will be America's new border czar, the man who will implement orders to deport potentially millions of people from the country. At the Republican convention in July, he made this pledge.
I got a message to the millions of illegal aliens that Joe Biden's releasing our country in violation of federal law. You better start packing now. Because you're going home.
Soon he'll have the power and resources to make good on that promise. Another right-winger, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York, will become America's ambassador to the United Nations.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FS.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You're invited to join us. 603-283-6160 if you would like to weigh in. Again, the number is 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight is Aria.
And Mr. Penguin.
Talking a bit about the economy, the election, savings, all of that great stuff. I hope people don't expect much from a Trump presidency. Now, cryptocurrency and his appointment of people who are friendly to the cryptocurrency industry, those are among the few things that Trump actually can do to have some actual impact, like replacing the head of the SEC, Gary Gensler, with someone who won't sue anyone and everyone who ever touched a cryptocurrency.
Do you know, does he have to get approval from Congress for those appointees? Because I know some
I believe
some
so.
of them he does, I think.
I believe so.
Okay.
But we do have an all-Republican Congress going into office at the same time that Trump goes into office.
Right, right.
So they should, in theory, support most of the people he wants to put in. But who knows?
Even if they didn't, though, I think he can still fire them. And then it ends up being up to like probably his appointing somebody and then them deciding yes or no.
Yeah, I have no idea. It's a confusing system. And then there's the Pendleton Act of the 1860s, I think it was, that effectively creates tenure for some of these administrative positions, which prevents the president from being able to fire some of them.
But they can probably demote them or remove them or something.
I'm not sure what it limits them to do. Jeffrey Tucker's an expert on this subject, and I learned what I know about it from him. But unfortunately, I'm not as good of a student as he is a teacher. So I just vaguely remember some of the details. But the details were that the Pendleton Act created this massive Leviathan state of administrators that more or less cannot be replaced by any particular president or another. Now, some of them can be, like he's picking this person or that person to head this department and that department. So I don't know what all of the specifics are, but I would like to see Gary Gensler replaced, certainly. But Anthony Fauci, for example, would be one of those administrators who was protected by the Pendleton Act, where Fauci could not have been fired by Donald Trump or Joe Biden. He was the head of the National Institute of Health Services, I believe it was, the NHS, or the NIHS. I don't remember what exactly the acronym was or what the institution was, but he was the COVID guy, right? Yep. Dr. Fauci, the Fauci ouchie with the shot and all that stuff. Yeah, he has been in that position since like the late 80s, and no president had ever replaced him. You got to ask, who is this person that Republicans didn't replace him and Democrats didn't replace him? Well, he was a career administrator, a career bureaucrat who could not have been replaced because he was protected by administration changes because of the Pendleton Act.
See, I know there are definitely bureaucratic positions that like you can't just change somebody in, I guess, but like or fire them, I guess, but like usually I think of that as more of like teachers and things of that nature.
Trump has said that one of his first actions as president would be to sack the current chair of the Securities and Exchange Commissioner, Gary Gensler. That would be fantastic. I would love to see Gary Gensler fired and someone who is less evil put in his place. Assuming they can find someone less evil, which is going to be difficult, but...
Yeah, the problem here, though, is he's going to end up in the private industry making boatloads of money after he's fired. Like, that's just how this is going to go.
I'm sorry, one more time. Oh, yeah, yes, he's going to enter. Yeah. He's going to get a job at Coinbase.
Yeah.
Or Gemini, or he's going to be a consultant.
Yes.
For Gemini and Coinbase.
The real question I wonder is, why haven't these administrators already left for, private industry where they pay you really well after you've been in these positions?
Well, I think he will, and a lot of them do. Like the former FDA head ended up to go on for the company that owned the patent for aspartame.
Yep.
After the FDA did something in regard to aspartame. And part of, I think, what he's trying to do here is create this hostile, impossible to navigate environment for cryptocurrencies, so that then he can quit this job or get fired and become a consultant to help these companies navigate this impossible to navigate territory and keep them from getting targeted by his successor.
Yep.
So I think that's more or less what he has been doing. And he is, of course, the chair of the SEC, those same SEC that went after LBRY and Jeremy Kauffman and gutted, destroyed LBRY. Horrific to watch. They disgorged the company, was the word they used, which even sounds violent and disgusting. Now, Odyssey survives. LBRY lives on. Jeremy Kauffman obviously lives on. And we don't know what the Trump administration is really going to do in regard to cryptocurrency, but two of those things would be great. Sacking Gary Gensler and commuting the sentence of Ross Ulbricht. Both of those things would be tremendously positive outcomes of the Trump administration. if he does them. I don't know that he's going to do them. We'll find out in a little over 2 months. Like Trump said that he would commute Ross's sentence on day one. I don't expect him to actually do that on day one.
I'll be happy if he commutes a sentence, period, let alone on day one.
I want him to do it within the first week, certainly.
I mean, that would be preferable, but I if he does it at all, I mean, these guys are liars and thieves.
I know.
I mean, do we really expect them to do what they? I really, honestly,
I mean, the numbers don't lie.
I don't know. Like, I'll be surprised. I'll be surprised if he even does it at all.
I think it's pretty clear looking at the numbers that a lot of libertarians threw in their weight behind Donald Trump.
Don't disagree with you on that one.
And I mean, it looks like probably roughly 1 million of them voted for Donald Trump instead of Chase Oliver.
Yep.
And I would suspect that the majority of those did that because of Trump's promise to commute Ross Ulbricht's sentence.
Yeah. And every single libertarian I've talked to about this you said it's Ross is the reason they're voting for Trump.
Yeah.
So,
and it does nothing for Trump now to keep his promise. He can't run a third time. Now, in theory, they could amend the Constitution to allow him to run, and who knows, maybe they'll do that. But it doesn't really affect his chances of running for office and winning again for him to keep this promise. It does, however, help future Republican candidates who want to appeal to libertarians. And Trump probably doesn't care about that. He probably doesn't care about Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz or whoever is going to run in 2028 and their attempts to win over libertarians. But time will tell. The fact is, though, that the libertarians did terribly in this particular election, and Donald Trump did better than expected. And a lot of libertarians probably voted for Donald Trump because of his promise to commute Ross Ulbricht's sentence. I want him to do that. And I want him to I want him to sack Gary Gensler, to fire him.
I feel like the only reason that he may really actually pardon Ross is to give the opposition of the middle finger. That's the only thing I can think of that like why? Because he doesn't have to. He's not going to lose anything if he doesn't keep his promise. And we don't expect, and the reality is the voting public doesn't expect these politicians to keep their promises either.
But libertarians do. And
I don't think so. I mean, I don't okay, what you want and what you expect are two different things, right? So
okay. Yes, we want him to keep his promise, and we think there's a good chance he won't. But I've got to hope that he will.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I agree. Yeah.
It sucks, dude. I hate having to rely on a politician for this kind of thing. That's so... why do I live in a world that is making me rely on a known liar? Someone who we knows lies. We know that. Why do I have to rely on him to keep his word for something positive to happen in the world? Can we do something about this? Can we maybe not have a system that requires me to say, well, I hope this lying liar who lies about lying happens to not be lying this particular time? So apparently Trump is also going to cut taxes and reduce regulations on business and other things, and all the things that Republicans always talk about and
I am
never
going
do.
to call BS on this, just because he's also said that he's going to raise tariffs, right? So how is this really benefiting businesses? And I question whether or not it even will, in that trade barriers, they hurt. They're not gonna help any. It's just yes, you may be paying less in taxes, corporate taxes, but if you pay more in tariffs, 25% is a huge number. And I think somebody was telling me he was talking about even higher than 25% tariffs, like 50% tariffs or 75% tariffs, which is just insane.
Wouldn't you think that we would be past this idea by now? The candle makers petition was written in 1958, apparently. And it was a satirical article saying that candle makers in the United Kingdom, or maybe it was France, I don't remember, couldn't compete with their competitors. Their competitor had an unfair advantage and could flood light throughout the entire world and mitigate people's needs for candles, and they just could not compete with it. It was, again, complete satire. But the point was that candle makers are producing a thing that provides light, and the sun provides light. So the sun is ruining their business. It's keeping them from making more money. And they wanted Congress or Parliament to do something about the sun, to ban the sun, basically. And that's exactly what tariffs are. It's an attempt to say, hey, this isn't fair. Will you do this impossible task that's going to make everything right again? They don't work.
Yep.
And the idea is fundamentally flawed. You can't ban the sun.
Trump is literally pulling the wolves over everyone's eyes and simultaneously not helping the people who like he's trying to help, and I put that in quotes, trying to help, because it's not benefiting. It's not going to benefit the businesses. I mean, it's going to hurt the businesses ultimately. It's going to have like a probably, I think one estimate was like a 1% economic like damage in the economy or something. I'm probably not saying that right, but you get the idea.
You mentioned previously that televisions are dirt cheap now, and they are. You can buy, I bought a 65-inch television a few years ago for like $400 or something. It's a massive television. When people come over like, oh my God, this television is huge.
Yeah.
But it was only like $400.
Yep.
That will not be the case if tariffs go up to the point where it becomes more cost effective for televisions to be produced in the United States. And that's why they're being produced in South Korea and Japan right now, and China, is because it's so much cheaper to produce them there.
These tariffs,
if you have to produce them here in the United States, first of all, what you'd have to do is you'd have to create tariffs on these goods. You'd have to create enough tariffs to raise the price of a television to $3,000 or $4,000. That's the only way you could make it cost effective and cheaper to build a television in the United States.
The tariffs are literally, it's this idea that you're going to bring industry back to them. I'm not saying that you can't have some industry in the United States, and we already have some industry in the United States. Don't get me wrong, but it's specialized. It's not cheap televisions that are being manufactured in the United States.
No, you have to compete with the workers in China and South Korea if you want those jobs, and they will work significantly cheaper than you will.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? Are you going to take 30 cents an hour as your pay rate?
Labor is just one aspect of it. All the things that go into building a television, like the circuits and the boards and the raw materials, that's not exact. We don't have local suppliers for any of that stuff because the mines have been closed for decades. All of this stuff China has because they got into the low cost, industrial, I don't industry is not quite the right word, but you get the idea. Industries, I guess, is the phrase.
Labor is not the only part, but I would argue that it is one of the most critical parts, because those people making 30 cents an hour, you live in a country that does not sustain you making 30 cents an hour.
No.
You have to make $12, $13, $14 an hour just to survive, right? No one here in Keene is actually making minimum wage, but even if we accept that you have to make at least $7 an hour just to survive the minimum wage, you are making significantly more than the people in South Korea and China whose jobs you want to compete with by bringing those industries over here. They cannot pay you $7 an hour to produce the same $400 television that they're producing in South Korea. That cost is going to increase that television to several $1,000s, and you can't afford a several $1,000 television. Things are out of balance right now throughout the world. Or they're actually relatively balanced, but that balance requires you to be able to buy your cheap television from people making 30 cents an hour in South Korea. And whether you like that or not, that's just the way the world is right now. And it's a good thing for the people in South Korea or China or whatever, because now they have jobs. And as Rich Paul used to point out a lot on the show, if you have people who live in poverty and you want to alleviate that poverty, then what you need to do is give them money. You need to give them jobs. You need to liquidate the poverty. And you do that by hiring them, giving them jobs to produce things, to create things. And we buy those things that they are producing and that they are creating. We are giving them jobs and allowing them to buy groceries and houses and cars and cell phones and stuff for themselves. It's not a bad thing that they're making 30 cents an hour because they live in an economy where their television doesn't cost $4,000 or even $400.
And the crazy thing I find crazy about this is that people are so afraid of losing their jobs when we have some of the lowest unemployment rates that we've had in decades and decades and decades. We have less than a 4% unemployment rate in a good portion of like New Hampshire. And like, that's like, you're actually getting into like super dangerous territory when you go below that percentage roughly.
Well, that's what the Keynesians say. But the reality is that if you can have unemployment, you can also have overemployment, where there are too many jobs and not enough people to do them.
Well, I mean,
which requires you to bring in immigrants and stuff like that, and other wonderful things to get more people into the place.
Right.
But you can have too many jobs and too few people.
Yes.
But we live in a Keynesian economy that always pushes things in the other direction, where we have too many people and not enough jobs, which forces you and your neighbors to compete with one another for a job. Where in a healthy environment, in a healthy economy, you would have two jobs competing with each other to hire you. Instead of you competing with your neighbor, your employers are competing with each other to get you to work for them. One's saying, I'll give you $12 an hour. The other one's saying, I'll give you $15 in benefits. That's what we should have. Instead, you're like, I'll do your job for $11, and your neighbor goes, no, I'll do it for $10, because both of you need that job. And that's a result of unemployment and having too many people and too few jobs. But you could go the other direction.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You can have it both ways, effectively. You can have both too few. Yeah, you can have it there's not enough jobs and too many jobs. And right now we've got too many jobs. Well, and it's not even so much we have too many.
We have too many people right now and not enough jobs.
Well,
or that's what they're alleging. And it's
more
really
like,
just a result of the broken economy.
I think it's more along the lines of we've got too many people looking for high paying jobs, and then not enough people looking for lower paying jobs. And it's like those lower paying jobs are now paying more than the high paying jobs, but nobody wants to go into the trades. Therefore, we end up with this really messed up, this weird backwards situation where the cost of living skyrockets. And it's not just because of, the lack of employees for trades, but it's part of the problem, And
it's not just for trades either. You can walk down the street here in Keene and just see countless help wanted signs everywhere. Everywhere is hiring.
Sure, absolutely.
From banks to warehouses to factories to gas stations, everywhere is hiring.
It is, but it's particularly true. So it's particularly true for the trades, which is affecting us from a cost of living perspective, from a housing perspective. So increased rents, for example, right? But there's also obviously increased costs of getting a pizza, because now you have to pay 3 times as much because they don't have enough employees to serve all of their customers, so they can increase the prices there. So,
yeah, it's a mess, and the economy is not going to get any healthier anytime soon as a result of Donald Trump or Joe Biden.
Nope.
The only thing that's going to make the economy healthy at this point is to get away from the U.S. dollar, because that is what is making everything broken and skewed in the first place. And that's a long, difficult, arduous path, and it won't be pleasant to get to that point, because there will be a lot of people who just never get into an alternative. They'll never buy gold, they'll never buy silver, they'll never buy cryptocurrency. They'll never even buy lead or bullets or whatever it is that people think they're going to buy in order to secure some standing in a world that doesn't rely on sheets of paper. But that's the world we live in, where they can just print sheets of paper and call it money, and we'll fight to the death. People will fight to the death over these sheets of paper with numbers printed on them. It's completely insane behavior. The more you analyze it, the more insane it actually looks. We dedicate our entire lives to acquiring sheets of paper with numbers on them. And surely life is meant to be about more than that.
I so feel that way about my degree. So I have a college degree. I have a 4-year Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, and I feel exactly that way about that piece of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, that degree is just it's literally something I'd wipe my behind with.
Yeah. My degree equally useless.
It's like, well,
but the paper money of the government's exactly as useless.
And the funny thing is about this is like that it's actually like a more worthwhile degree, I feel like, than what a lot of people go for.
Yeah, it's no liberal arts.
Yeah, right. Like it's like, okay, it is, but at the same time, it's like for me personally, it's like, okay, I went down a line where like this didn't benefit me in any intellectual capacity or way. So it's not like the only thing it ever would have helped me with is maybe get a job at a company that I would never have gone to work for in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I think the act of going to college benefited me, but I don't think the college degree actually has ever brought me any benefit.
I think it hurt me. I mean, I lost 4 years of economic activity that I could have had.
Yeah.
Plus the, a couple $100,000 on my education. I mean, that's not nothing. I mean, there's nothing I'm doing today. And this is the case for most people who go to college. There's nothing that they're doing. Usually most people go to college, they get a degree, but what they go to college for isn't what they end up doing work-wise. So there's no real benefit from like, yeah, it's just crazy.
But back to the useless sheets of paper things, the irony, the true tragedy of it, in fact, is that the more worthless the US dollar becomes, the more of your life you have to dedicate to acquiring it in order to get by. Like right now, people are already dedicating huge portions of their lives, 50, 60 hours a week, simply to acquiring more of these sheets of paper with numbers printed on them. And the worse the dollar gets, the more time they're going to have to spend doing that. The bigger the dollar is in their minds and the more of a focus of their existence the dollar becomes, until they're starving to death and they have to earn just a few more dollars to buy their next meal or their replacement pants for their child or gasoline to take their kid to school or whatever. The more worthless the dollar gets, the larger it becomes in our minds. And that's the tragedy of this, because we already are hyper-focused on money and earning money. Like as a society, we're kind of sick in that way anyway. Americans are obsessed with productivity and making money, and this is the point of your existence, is to make money for billionaires. But even that aside, you have to get out there and make money to pay your bills, to pay your rent. And that is increasingly difficult because of the USD becoming more and more worthless over time.
It's interesting. I feel like the past generations were more obsessed with money than the current generations, but the current generations are really, really good at spending it.
What do you mean by current generations? Because
that's a good
Zoomers
question.
probably don't care that much, but they're also just now really entering the workforce.
I think it's probably it's just become more and more true like over the generation. So it isn't like
I think people have become less materialistic. But
really?
I think
less
that's
materialistic.
Yeah, but I think that's because they can afford so much less than their previous people could, and the anti-materialism, the anti-materialist tendencies that we see, especially on TikTok and YouTube and so on, are just defense mechanisms against the fact that, well, yeah, you're never going to own a Mercedes anyway, so of course you're like, I'm not materialist enough to want a Mercedes. Well, yeah, because you'd never own one anyway. You're never going to own a house. You're never going to own a brand new car. So it just becomes a self-defense mechanism to say, I don't want a new car.
It seems to me like we order a lot more cheap junk just as individuals, and especially since like Amazon, right? Like the internet, right? Like the amount of junk that people buy is just skyrocketed by comparison to prior generations, like recent prior generations.
But is that a generational thing, or is that just because our grandparents didn't have Amazon?
Well,
they had Sears catalogs.
But they were much better at saving their money.
Well, their money was easier to save.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Yeah, it's not maybe necessarily a generation thing so much as a human thing that has gotten worse over the generations.
603-283-6160. What are your thoughts? Is it generational or is it economic? 603-283-6160. It is Free Talk Live.
Hi, I'm Derek J. To me, an activist's calling is to actively work to advance a cause. The cause for which I work is personal freedom. I believe my life is best when I engage in voluntary interactions and self-government. I reject the idea that anyone else has a higher claim to my life or my body than I do. I see people who call themselves the government as a threat to my personal freedom. I realize you may feel differently, but my relationship with the people who call themselves the government is completely involuntary. If Starbucks used some of its money to drop bombs, I wouldn't shop there. So why would I support the American empire? The empire does not require my consent.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. That's victimlesscrimespree.com.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Hire.
Climate change is already here. People are suffering in the shadows, and they're crying out for leadership and action.
The COP29 Climate Summit is getting underway in Azerbaijan. The annual United Nations meeting will be attended by delegations from 200 countries. The United States' envoy insists the climate fight will continue under a Donald Trump presidency, despite his threats to dismantle environmental safeguards and remove the US from a key international agreement to stop burning fossil fuels. The leaders of France and the UK say they'll support Ukraine for as long as necessary to, quote, thwart Russia's war of aggression. President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer marked Armistice Day in Paris. Donald Trump claims he'd end the war in Ukraine in one day, without saying how. But Britain's Defence Secretary says the president-elect is right to push European nations to increase their own NATO defence spending. Simon Gaitan reports.
UK Secretary of State for Defence John Healey insisted he expects a Trump-led US would not turn away from NATO. Trump has previously criticised NATO and accused other member countries of not spending enough on the bloc in comparison with the US, and during the election campaign even threatened to only defend countries that met their defence spending obligations.
Russia is denying that Donald Trump spoke with President Vladimir Putin on the phone. Mitch McCann has the details.
The Washington Post reported on Sunday local time that Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin had spoken during the week, where Mr. Trump advised him not to escalate the war in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the story was, quote, completely untrue. President Putin had congratulated Donald Trump and said he showed courage during the assassination attempt on his life earlier this year.
Mr. Trump's appointed a hardline member of his first term to head up the mass deportation of illegal immigrants from the United States. He's also rewarding one of his closest political allies by proposing to send her to the United Nations as America's next ambassador. Here's Simon Marks.
Tom Homan is one of the most prominent far-right figures in Donald Trump's inner circle. Now, the former head of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Division of the US government has been told by the president-elect that he will be America's new border czar, the man who will implement orders to deport potentially millions of people from the country. At the Republican convention in July, he made this pledge.
I got a message to the millions of illegal aliens that Joe Biden's releasing our country in violation of federal law. You better start packing now, because you're going home.
Soon he'll have the power and resources to make good on that promise. Another right-winger, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York, will become America's ambassador to the United Nations.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at what Donald Trump's big election win might mean for the two biggest foreign policy crises on the world stage. As you know, the president-elect has vowed to resolve the war in Gaza and the war in Ukraine on day one of his presidency. But what does that look like? Sam Kiley is a veteran broadcaster and writer specialising in international affairs.
On the one hand, you've got his fulsome support for Netanyahu, and then on the other, his suggestion that even before he takes office, he might be able to bring peace to Ukraine. That would only come If there is a commitment handing over the Donbass plus a huge chunk of the east of the country to permanent Russian sovereignty, and that's something that the Zelensky's ruled out. But let's not forget the Europeans also ruled that out. Macron saying at that gathering, the European political gathering of leadership, saying essentially that the EU in the wake of the Trump administration is going to have to start paying a lot more if it perceives the threat to be what it says it is.
Much of this, of course, will be determined by the composition of Trump's new foreign policy team. It could include his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, in an unofficial position focused on the Middle East, with the Ukraine negotiations to be handled by his Secretary of State, possibly the extreme right Rick Grinnell, who served as Trump's ambassador to Germany first time around. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
Our top stories again. The COP29 climate summit is getting underway in Azerbaijan. The annual United Nations meeting will be attended by delegations from 200 countries. The leaders of France and the UK say they'll support Ukraine for as long as necessary to, quote, thwart Russia's war of aggression. President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer marked Armistice Day in Paris. This as Russia denies that Donald Trump spoke with President Vladimir Putin on the phone. That's the latest feature story news. I'm Benji Haya in Washington.
CEO Jeff Potkel went berserk earlier this morning, becoming drenched in his own blood and the blood of several employees as he viciously demanded the staff produce more web video content, or he would, quote, kill them all.
We need more videos! Videos with bands! Random videos! Funny videos! I want a video with a celebrity! I don't give a shit which one! You think this is funny? I'll show you funny!
He threw our office manager's body against the door and then told us that nobody could leave unless we came up with 3 original video ideas. Then he made us watch as he bit his own tongue in half.
People don't want to read! They want videos! They want to sit at work and watch videos! Videos need to go viral! 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 Viral!
This is the Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
Welcome back to the third hour here on Free Talk Live. You can join us 603-283-6160 if you want to do that. Again, the number is 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, it's Aria.
And Mr. Penguin.
And Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash, which is short for digital cash. In addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project with a decentralized autonomous organization that to this day continues to improve and promote Dash. And I believe it was the first decentralized autonomous organization, period. But it was certainly the first DAO project in cryptocurrency. And I say I think it was the first period because the concept of the decentralized autonomous organization requires cryptocurrency in order for it to work. It has the voting mechanism sort of built into the blockchain, and that's kind of necessary to have a decentralized organization where no one is in charge and the organization is autonomous and has no, quote, will of its own and just is a extension of what the masses of people want it to do. In theory, the United States government would be a centralized autonomous organization where like the votes of the masses tell it what to do and what it should do. Of course, it's been co-opted, and it's been co-opted since it began by individual interests who have their own ideas and who don't really care what you want. But that's the benefit of the decentralized autonomous organization. It has no individuals there who can have a will of their own, a mind of their own to direct the organization one direction or another. We want to say thank you to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month for this sponsorship. It's easy to get and to use Dash. You can learn more at dash.org. Again, that is dash.org. Now, the election has a lot of people upset. Mostly Democrats. Republicans seem to be doing mostly okay. I mean, their guy won, their team won. But whether your team won or not, it's really not a big deal. One of the things I've been trying to remind people of since Tuesday night is that this doesn't really change anything, right? I'm hoping to see some changes in the cryptocurrency world, and I'm hoping to see Ross Ulbricht pardoned, because those are two things that the president actually can have an impact on. But overall, nothing ever changes. The war machine goes on. The drug war goes on unabated. The police state continues to grow. More and more people continue to live paycheck to paycheck. The dollar becomes worth less and less. Jobs pay you less and less proportional to the cost of groceries and goods and electricity and rent. Families continue to get separated at the border. Wars continue to be fought all across the globe. And everything just sort of continues on exactly how it has been going, regardless of who the president is. Nothing changed when we went from George W. Bush to Barack Obama. Nothing whatsoever changed as a result of that. And nothing changed when we went from Obama to Trump. Nothing then changed when we went from Trump to Biden. And nothing is going to change again when we go from Biden back to Trump. Now, a lot of people might say that I'm jaded, but and that's true. But like, I've been watching this now for 24 years, right? I've seen 6 presidential elections now. As a rational thinking person, I wasn't old enough to vote in 2000, but I was aware of what was happening, and the same in 2004. Wasn't old enough to vote, but I was aware of things that were happening, and I was watching it closely, because even then I was sort of interested in all of it. And I've seen that nothing ever changes. I had hope I had so much hope when we elected Barack Obama. I really did. I was like, this is it, man. This is the guy. Change I can believe in. I believe. That's what broke me. I believed in Obama. I really did. Hook, line, and sinker, man. I thought this dude was going to go out there and he was going to help world peace. I thought he was going to put an end to the warmongering. He was going to be the peace candidate. So did a lot of people, because that's what he campaigned on. We were tired of war and we wanted someone to be peaceful. A lot of people came by later, a lot of Democrats like, well, he didn't do anything about Wall Street. No, the Wall Street stuff happened while Obama was in office. He never promised to take on Wall Street. That wasn't why we supported Barack Obama. We didn't care about Wall Street at that time. We didn't have the luxury of caring about Wall Street. We cared about the war, the endless, never-ending war, and the recession that had just started in 2007, which wasn't really, well, it was a result of Wall Street, but it was more about the banking industry and real estate loans. And Wall Street wouldn't get blamed until like 2009, I think, maybe 2010. I don't remember when Occupy Wall Street happened. It may have actually been 2012. I tend to think that Occupy Democrats, which was a response to Occupy Wall Street, came about in 2012. But this was all a very long time ago, so I'm just trying to remember events as they happened more than a decade ago. Anyway.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, Barack Obama, not a peaceful person at all. Continued all of the wars, dropped more bombs than any president in American history up until that point. And I didn't have any hope that anything was going to improve by going to Joe Biden. I mean, Donald Trump, why would I? Yep. By then, I was not a Republican or a Democrat. I knew that both of these people were liars, and I wanted nothing to do with either of them. And then, of course, I discovered Ron Paul as a result of the mockumentary zeitgeist, and I became a libertarian. I started reading and researching and learning about these things, and I realized that, yeah, libertarians are right. These are two sides of the same coin, these Republicans, these Democrats.
Yep.
They are professional wrestlers who, in front of the camera, they claim to hate each other and they're vicious enemies, right? But it's just, I'm really going to date myself on this one, but it's just NWO Red versus NWO Black, which is a WCW reference from like the mid-90s or something. I don't know what the current wrestling cliques are because I don't watch wrestling, but that's all it is. It's professional wrestling. It's because, and you can see this when some important legislation is about to come up for debate. There's always enough Republicans who will vote with the Democrats and enough Democrats who will vote with the Republicans to make sure that the war machine goes on unabated, that the banking industry continues on unabated. There's always just enough people who are willing to work with the other side to pass this important legislation that harms you, the individual out there who is being ruled over by these people. They're all on the same team, and they do a really good job of convincing people that they're not, but when push comes to shove, they are our enemies, they are our rulers, and they are working together to secure their rule over us. But let's go to the phones to someone who disagrees. Sarah, you're on Free Talk Live. I'm sure you don't agree that Republicans and Democrats are identical. Is that correct?
Oh, no. It's like I said, it's always the lesser of the two evils. We live in an imperfect world. But
I agree. I agree that the choice between Democrats and Republicans is a choice between evils. I fully agree with that, Sarah. And you agree with that as well?
Yeah.
Right.
I think so.
They're always going to have the wars. It's not going to end. But, again, it's like, could they do like 5 things for you instead of taking 3 things from you? That's the only choice you got.
Well, you're choosing evil, though.
Well, but do you want perfection? How are you going to get like a perfect...
The choice is not perfection or evil.
World?
The choice is not perfection or evil, Sarah. There's a huge spectrum there between perfectly good and evil. We can have a evil person without having to be perfect.
You know that John F. Kennedy, he took like 8% of the vote. You know what? How much is like 8% in state of Georgia? It's like
you said John F. Kennedy.
300,000 votes.
I think you meant Robert Kennedy, right?
8% out of 5 million votes in state of Georgia is like $300,000. That was supposed to go to Harris.
Sarah, you mean yes, you mean Robert Kennedy. Okay. John F. Kennedy was a president. I think he was in the 60s, 70s.
No, look at that Robert Kennedy, that last guy that turned and he said, "I'm voting for Trump." The last guy that was his whole job.
Robert Kennedy voted for Donald Trump.
Did he? Well, no. Why would he do that?
I doubt that he did.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like
candidate. And then he says, "I'm not going to win anyways. I'm going to vote for Trump." His whole job is to split up the progressive vote, to split up the Democrats. He's done a very good job of it.
I really doubt that Robert Kennedy voted for Donald Trump. I'm going to look, but
he's got a job at his cabinet, an appointee to have
Let's
a job.
see. From USA Today, Robert F. Kennedy is pleading to voters across the United States not to vote for him if his name appears on their ballots and to instead vote for former President Donald Trump.
Right, that was his job.
You are correct in that assertion. And that's another factor that I would like to point out. Robert Kennedy did have a lot of support from libertarians.
That's correct.
Yes, but libertarians are not progressives, Sarah. I would bet that a lot of the people who voted for Robert Kennedy would otherwise have voted for the Libertarian Party candidate, Chase Oliver. Jill Stein, the hard left candidate, her votes didn't seem to be very much affected by Robert Kennedy. But Chase Oliver, the Libertarian Party candidate, he got destroyed. Worse than I've ever seen a Libertarian Party presidential candidate do.
Okay, Elon Musk, that one that paid a $1 million lottery, now he's going to get $1 billion federal tax dollar money to help his company. That's the pay. You scratch my back, I'll turn around and I'll scratch your back.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
You know it.
Yeah, but Elon Musk is a welfare whore anyway.
Yes.
Like, I hate Elon. I don't hate Elon Musk because I don't hate people.
Oh, he's playing the game, that's for sure.
Yeah, and he's complete evil.
So he paid, how much did he spent? Like $125 million?
I don't know or care how much Elon Musk spent.
That's what it is. You're the lottery. If you're a MAGA voter, one person got picked
wait a minute.
2 weeks before.
How is it that how can you hate Elon Musk? You're a big socialist. Aren't you big on socialism?
Yeah, but the money that's going to his company is for his private company. It's not.
Yeah, but you're in favor of redistributing the wealth, right?
Yeah, but you know what?
Why aren't you supporting Elon? You should be supporting Elon in this situation.
Yeah, this is literally taking wealth and money from like us ordinary taxpayers, the people. It's taking money from the people and redistributing it
This is exactly what they do
They
under
give it
communism.
to the billionaire. He's a billionaire. Do you know who he is? He's not.
Yeah, I know who he is.
That's exactly how he became a billionaire as well, is by doing exactly this.
Well, he's a capitalist, but that's a.
But he's
prime example of the
how can he be a
dangers of
capitalist, Sarah?
Trump.
He's a billionaire because of socialism and because of
right.
forced redistribution of the wealth from ordinary people to his own pockets via the government. That's not capitalism.
Well, whatever he was doing, it's illegal. He was buying votes. People said that's illegal to offer lottery money to vote for Trump.
Okay, Sarah, look, I don't like Elon Musk either. What else you got?
Okay, but that's the thing. Okay, so the thing is, the lie is, remember Putin says, I'm for Kamala, I like her personality? They twist everything around and said that Putin helped Donald Trump win, and that's a complete lie. It came out that Russians were helping the Democrats. At that time, Hillary Clinton, it came out, but they said that the Russian collusion, they're distorting it. They don't want you to really know.
I need clarification here.
A socialist program is sponsored by the communist socialists. They don't want people to know that.
Sarah, I need clarification here. Are you saying that Putin, Vladimir Putin, supported Kamala Harris, and and what result do you think this had?
Well, the thing is that the truth was that he was helping Hillary Clinton with the collusion thing that they were detecting.
Okay.
And then they screwed it up and said that he was trying to help Donald Trump win. It's to confuse the voters.
Well, you're confusing me.
What socialism Democrat is. So they accuse her of being a communist socialist, right?
Sarah, you're confusing me. Do you think that Putin was helping Kamala Harris?
That's correct. That's correct.
You think that? Okay. I thought you supported Kamala Harris.
Putin supported Kamala Harris because she has communist socialist agenda. Medicaid, Medicare, lowering the medication costs.
And you like all of those things. Correct?
Okay, but they want to confuse the American voters, the dumb voters. They're so confused.
Okay, Sarah, stop, because you're confusing me again. I'm trying to understand your position on this. So you like Putin, right?
That's correct. But
I didn't know that. I assumed
I'm a communist. I'm for North Korea.
I assumed you were hardcore Ukraine. Support Ukraine, whatever.
Yeah, I would have expected that.
Did you just say you support North Korea, Sarah? Are you a troll? Level with me.
I want the Russians to take back Ukraine. I'm not for Ukraine. No.
Wait, really?
They accuse her. See, they accuse her of being a communist, and what she is.
I don't know if this is real. This is just.
It is not evil.
This doesn't make any sense. She's so inconsistent, and it doesn't what she comes out of her mouth doesn't make any sense.
That is what I would expect from a communist, though. An actual communist is for her to support a communist regime against Ukraine. The Democrat line, the progressive line, is to support Ukraine. But Sarah, if she's a true communist, is going to support the communist Russians. They're not actually communist. I know they're not.
The thing is that they have to play that, I'm a capitalist, I'm for small business, I'm for Ukraine. They say that, but the policy is to allow the Russians to take over. Of course.
I think this is my favorite call with Sarah ever. Sarah, you said you support North Korea's government? You
Did she say that?
Yeah, I'm in favor of the North Koreans being in the Ukraine, helping them fight.
Okay, what about that aside? Do you support North Korea government? Do you like what the North Korea government is doing? Are you looking at them like, you guys are doing great?
It's socialism. I think so, because it's a communist.
I'm curious if you like North Korea, you can potentially go there and cross the border and join them. There are Americans who have done this.
Well, I have more important job is to establish communism here. That's my role. It's called the belly of the beast.
Oh, this is interesting. So you want to bring the North Korean system to America?
Well, yeah, if it's like Social Security, pension,
we have those
Medicaid,
things.
Medicare, socialist program. That's what they have.
Dude,
we really do have these things already.
Dude, I think this has to be next level trolling. I'm really starting to think that Sarah has just been trolling us all these years on a level that I'm just now beginning to grasp. because that.
Okay, how do you know
if there was
what's
a
going on in North
libertarian
Korea
who was
unless the lies
pretending,
that they tell you?
hold on, Sarah.
It's
If there was a
propaganda that's telling you.
if there was a libertarian out there pretending to be communist in order to make it sound ridiculous, and to point out that the United States is actually communist and socialist.
People think that we pay her to come on the show.
Yeah, they would say exactly the things that Sarah is saying.
Yeah.
No communist out there anywhere in the world would support the North Korean government doing the things to their people that the North Korea government is doing.
No, they're always defending and saying, "Oh, well, we wouldn't do it like that."
Well, pension is a communism. That's what the Boeing workers want. And then the capitalist government, they won't give them a pension. They ended 10 years ago. Pension is a communist program, so I support that.
And I've only ever met libertarians who point out that pensions and 401ks and Social Security and government education centers are socialism. I've never met a Democrat or a Republican.
Socialism. That is communism. That's why pensions
I know it is.
Right, but they don't want.
But I'm against those things, and I'm just shocked. I'm legitimately shocked, and I think you have to be trolling us, Sarah. Are you a libertarian?
I do not understand what I am not a libertarian, and as a communist, we have to support the Democratic Party to get rid
I think you're onto something here. She's trolling. She's been trolling us all these years.
Trump will do the most damage. What did they say? As soon as he got elected, the wealthy got a tax break. They're paying less tax now. It's the first thing he did 2 days after.
He's not president yet. He can't do any tax breaks right now. He doesn't take office until like January the 7th or 8th.
Oh, really? When he gets he's going to make sure that the top 1% pay less tax than what they're paying now.
Yeah, probably, but I don't really care. I want to get back to North Korea, Sarah. I really want to thank you for the call tonight. You give me a lot to think about. I like that you're consistent, right? I really do. That you're willing to stand there and support the North Korean government. I don't think there's any other communist who would call in and say they support.
The government is have you lived there? How do I know? How do you know all that you hear about?
Wait a minute.
I have read extensively.
You support a government that you have no idea how they operate because you haven't lived there.
I mean, I'm assuming they have Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and pension.
Why are you assuming these things?
Programs where they make
because they claim to be a communist government, therefore they have what they say.
Sarah, you need to read Dear Leader. It's a book written by someone who fled the North Korean government. And I realize you're going to say it's capitalist propaganda, right? Because I realize you're going to say that, but read it. And then read an article online about the North Korean government and some of the absolutely horrible things they're doing to their people.
Communist Kamala, what is he saying? I'm going to tax the wealthy. The wealthy people are going to pay tax. I'm going to have affordable medication prices. Those are communist agendas. She wants the labor unions to have pension back. That's a communist program.
So do you think it helped?
She's going to make sure that she secures Social Security. That's a communist program.
Yeah, I know. Sarah, do you think it helped or hurt Donald Trump that Putin said that he likes Kamala Harris?
Did people really hear that? I think that people are so turned around. They probably thought communism is horrible because that's what people beat into people's head ever since they could think.
That's
right?
That's not what I asked you.
They were in the diaper.
Putin is on the record, jokingly for what it's worth. He was not being serious when he said this, but he did say that he wanted Kamala to win. He prefers her over Donald Trump because she has an infectious laugh. Now, he was making a joke, but do you think...
Right, but she has communist agenda.
Okay,
communist policy.
None of that matters. Do you think that hurt Donald Trump or helped him?
I guess that must have helped. That must have helped him with that flying French fries. And I was laughing. I was saying, how is flying French fries at McDonald's win him an election? And it turns out it helped. I mean, as silly as he is, I was cracking up. When you said that for a couple of days.
You definitely cracking up. Sarah, thank you so much for the call tonight. I don't know what to think anymore.
I want to know where she even came into communism from. Because I mean, she's got to be old enough to where
didn't her grandmother escape from communist China or one of those?
Did she say something of that?
I thought so.
I get the impression that she went through McCarthyism, and like she lived through that era, and I mean she's pretty old. I don't know exactly how old she is, but I think she's up there in age. I know that. Like I would think like they would have. I don't know. Like this just seems crazy to me that somebody of that era would.
I've got to spend some time thinking because I know a few years ago I asked Sarah if she was trolling, but after tonight's conversation, like I'm honestly beginning to think, is Sarah trolling us? Because if so, that's been a master level troll.
Right.
I'm envious of that level of trolling. 603-283-6160. There's more coming up. It is Free Talk Live.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Rising fees have made Bitcoin useless for purchases, but Dash continues to have fees less than 1 cent per transaction, and its features ensure Dash is undefeated as the most useful cryptocurrency in the marketplace. From a technical standpoint, Dash transactions are irreversible, and its network is protected from 51% attacks by their Chainlocks technology. There's no need to wait for a confirmation before considering a Dash transaction complete, so it's great for merchants. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at Dash.org. Big thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Hire.
Climate change is already here. People are suffering in the shadows, and they're crying out for leadership and action.
The COP29 Climate Summit is getting underway in Azerbaijan. The annual United Nations meeting will be attended by delegations from 200 countries. The United States' envoy insists the climate fight will continue under a Donald Trump presidency, despite his threats to dismantle environmental safeguards and remove the US from a key international agreement to stop burning fossil fuels. The leaders of France and the UK say they'll support Ukraine for as long as necessary to, quote, thwart Russia's war of aggression. President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer marked Armistice Day in Paris. Donald Trump claims he'd end the war in Ukraine in one day, without saying how. But Britain's Defence Secretary says the president-elect is right to push European nations to increase their own NATO defence spending. Simon Gaitan reports.
UK Secretary of State for Defence John Healey insisted he expects a Trump-led US would not turn away from NATO. Trump has previously criticised NATO and accused other member countries of not spending enough on the bloc in comparison with the US, and during the election campaign even threatened to only defend countries that met their defence spending obligations.
Russia is denying that Donald Trump spoke with President Vladimir Putin on the phone. Mitch McCann has the details.
The Washington Post reported on Sunday local time that Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin had spoken during the week, where Mr. Trump advised him not to escalate the war in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the story was, quote, completely untrue. President Putin had congratulated Donald Trump and said he showed courage during the assassination attempt on his life earlier this year.
Mr. Trump's appointed a hardline member of his first term to head up the mass deportation of illegal immigrants from the United States. He's also rewarding one of his closest political allies by proposing to send her to the United Nations as America's next ambassador. Here's Simon Marks.
Tom Homan is one of the most prominent far-right figures in Donald Trump's inner circle. Now the former head of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Division of the US government has been told by the president-elect that he will be America's new border czar, the man who will implement orders to deport potentially millions of people from the country. At the Republican convention in July, he made this pledge.
I got a message to the millions of illegal aliens that Joe Biden's releasing our country in violation of federal law. You better start packing now. Because you're going home.
Soon he'll have the power and resources to make good on that promise. Another right-winger, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York, will become America's ambassador to the United Nations.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FS.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
is Free Talk Live. Sometimes we just never get the answers to burning questions. And we'll never know, unfortunately. There's no way for us to ever know whether or not Sarah is trolling us. I think the first time I accused her of trolling us was back in regard to the death penalty when we were talking about it. And I pointed out that we know that a number of people in prisons are ultimately innocent and that they get proven to be innocent. And we know that a number of people who have been executed for things were in fact not guilty. They were innocent of the crimes that they were executed for. And Sarah then went on to say that she's okay with that. She knows that some innocent people will be put to death, but she's fine with that because we should still have a death penalty. And that was the point where I was like, you have to be trolling. No sane, rational person would say they're okay with innocent people being killed.
I mean, maybe she's just envious of being able to kill people.
It's very likely. She is a communist, after all, and that is what communists are good at.
Yeah.
And then to say that she supports the North Korea, I thought for sure with that whole Putin thing that she was pro-Ukraine.
You would think?
I just assumed that she was pro-Ukraine because she's such a hardcore progressive. But more than any of that, apparently, she's a communist, first and foremost. So she supports Russia, even though Russia isn't
not
communist.
Like,
I don't know.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me at all. Like
it doesn't.
I mean, I can understand her not being pro-Ukraine, but I don't understand her. I don't know. Her logic just doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
I mean, the United States is as much communist as Russia is, which she helpfully pointed out for us. Like pensions, 401ks, well, not 401ks so much.
Yeah, I don't know about the 401ks and the pension. I mean, the pensions are a little bit different too, probably.
State-run pensions.
But state-run pensions, maybe. Yeah.
Medicaid, food stamps, all of those things.
Definitely
education system.
Food stamps, definitely
all
redistributing
socialism.
All the wealth programs for capital, from the corporations and things of that nature, for sure.
But when you do that from the masses and you give that money to companies instead, that's still communism, Sarah. That's still
socialism.
Yeah, to be fair, communism and socialism are not the same thing. And I think Sarah knows that, but it's still socialism. If you take the money and you give it to people for pensions or Medicaid or healthcare or whatever, it's still socialism if you give it to a company to work on some industry. Like it's still socialism.
Yep. That's the same thing the communists did in Soviet Russia. I mean, they took money or they took resources and they divided up and they told you, hey, you have to go work here on this farm or whatever. And then they took the farm and it's like, that's redistribution of wealth.
That's how Venezuela destroyed their economy, by giving control of industries and giving money to people
government monopolies
who weren't qualified to do those things. And then they went broke. So a whole mess of things. Well, let's keep going with the phones. We do have several callers on the line, so I want to get through them. We have David on the line from New Mexico. David, you're on Free Talk Live.
People's Republic of New Mexico.
Going full-blown commie over there.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it amazing that there's no better way to know that a place is a communist or a socialist dictatorship than for it to have the People's Republic in the name? Like the People's Democratic Republic of Korea is none of those things.
Yeah, well, that's exactly how they would do it. That's been said forever. They say the opposite of what they are.
Yep.
Homeland Security.
Yep. The Patriot Act.
Yeah, right.
Yep. Patriot Act. Yep. Another good one.
Yeah, military intelligence is the oxymoron thing.
Yep.
Oh, what about all those bills and that they passed, like Children Online Protection Act stuff?
Yeah.
It's like it all hurts the children. It doesn't help them.
So what's on your mind tonight, David?
Well, a couple things you said earlier, but one of them being they don't just separate families at the border. They separate families deep in the heart of America in the family court system.
Also a really valid point.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I want to get to the money thing, the Bitcoin kind of thing, the markets, but you also mentioned other forms of worthless paper, like a college degree. I got the ultimate worthless college degree story. So I got a 4-year degree, and a 2-year degree, but I got a 4-year degree, and I did it in 2 years and 2 quarters because I wanted to get it over with. And in order to do it that fast, I just took a communications and an aviation, a double major, but one of them I was doing anyway because it was professional pilot to go to the airlines. So I had aviation as one major and communications as the second. And the only reason that I went to college instead of going straight into flying was because the major airlines required a 4-year degree in order to apply.
Wow.
So that makes you a better pilot, right?
I guess so. In their weird little worldview. It at least proves that you're willing to sit in a classroom for 4 years worth of classes.
Yeah, but so yeah, I guess the only loss.
You would think 12 years of public education, though, would have, shown that you can.
13, Chris. 13, you're forgetting about kindergarten.
Sorry, 13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, degrees are largely useless. Thank you tonight for the call, David. I have a college degree. I have a degree in the management of information systems. While it's been helpful to me in hobbies and like my side stuff, and it's helpful to do the show here, like I don't do anything related to IT these days.
Here's the thing. I don't necessarily think that like higher education is like education in and of itself isn't really the problem. It's the system that we have that pushes everybody into go to college for money. I have a friend who's got a master's degree in psychology. She works at a restaurant now. Yep. I have another friend who went to college for being a marine biologist. She did not ultimately become a biologist. She got a 4-year degree instead. Doesn't do anything related to that now. Another friend who's got a master's in something with athletics. Doesn't do any of that now. So you know more people than I, but well, maybe not. But I can think of at least one person who went into teaching and then they couldn't get a job teaching. Like it's like you literally have a degree, 4 years you spent and wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you have a load of debt, and now you're literally working at a fast food joint that probably paid worse than McDonald's.
Let's keep going though. We have Aaron on the line with us. Aaron, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hello, how y'all doing?
Hey, what's on your mind tonight?
Oh, well, I was kind of wanting to answer some of what Sarah was saying. It sounded kind of like Kamala Harris word salad. I thought she was almost for Trump, and then I don't know, some of that confusing Saul Alinsky type speech. But as far as communism goes, Stalin killed over 40 million people during World War II by starving them to death, and Mao killed 50 million, 100 million. I mean,
Yeah, to say nothing of the gulags. When I was in prison, I read the Gulag Archipelago, the first 2 volumes. I never finished the 3rd volume. And this was an industrialized prison system that was meant to turn people into slaves until it killed them. And it was core to the entire USSR regime.
The Uyghurs in in China, there's like 1 million Uyghurs.
In the Xinjiang province.
And they're just sitting there basically being used for whatever. I don't know what, people can't go in there and even see what they're doing with those folks.
There's a lot of organ harvesting that seems to be going on because around the time that the Chinese government solved it or started imprisoning the Uyghur population, it didn't have a very good rate of people who needed organs receiving the organs that they needed. Then they began incarcerating all of the Uyghurs, and suddenly, hey, they have almost perfect organ donation status. And obviously, a lot of the stuff that you buy on Wish comes from the Xinjiang province, and it was made by Uyghurs who are being forcefully indoctrinated and enslaved by the Chinese government to produce these cheap goods to be sold to people on Wish.com. It's a Holocaust that's happening right now.
What do they pay them? $50 a month, or they used to? I mean, they'd give them $50 a month, and they got.
I doubt they pay the Uyghurs anything. I mean, they live in prison camps.
General population, they're not giving them anything. So it's like, but people just want to point out how Denmark's so great. Well, yeah, Denmark's got 18 million people or so, however many people they've got. It's not a lot.
Yeah.
And as far as libertarianism goes, that's what I've been for 25 years. And I don't think that people realize just how bad that communism is when all the communists that have come to America, like is it Yuri Bedmanov? You know who I'm talking about on YouTube.
I do not know who you're talking about.
He do what now?
I do not know who you're talking about.
look him up.
Well, like, there's plenty of people like this, like the guy who wrote Dear Leader, who escaped from North Korea. There's several people who escaped from China who have written about how awful China is. Lily Tang Williams, who's a routine candidate here in New Hampshire for various offices, is a Chinese escapee who regularly talks about the horrors of communism in China.
Well, he explains how they come and take a country over with like the media, with China owning, a good portion of Hollywood. They own most of the pork industry in America. Like Sarah Sanders kicked out some Chinese communist company, just totally seized their land, seized their whole business, and told them, "You're done, get out." And
sounds like a communist way of handling it, honestly. Well, thank you so much for the call tonight, Aaron. We do have other people on the line that we've got to get to. Seizing people's land and their company and stuff like that, that's also straight out of the communist playbook. I mean, that's how they come to power in the first place. So I definitely can't get on board with that. And I did have to end the call real quickly because I just realized I needed to give a shout out to Jesse as well before we get too further into our other callers. Jesse is tonight's amplifier. That means that Jesse is a member of our Patreon. You can find it at patreon.com/freetalklive, or you can just go to amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com, or just search for Free Talk Live on Patreon. There's probably a link over at freetalklive.com. I need to make a note to check for that, actually, because there may actually not be a link on freetalklive.com, but there should be. So check it out, amps.freetalklive.com. It is our Patreon, and it doesn't really come with any official perks. Now, we do have the Free Talk Cast there, and we do upload it before we make it publicly available. So you get the Free Talk Cast like a day before everyone else gets it. But that's not really an advertised perk. If you sign up for the AMPS program, it should be because you value Free Talk Live and you want to help show your support. Signing up for our Patreon is by far the best way to do that. And we appreciate everyone over there, including Jesse, as I said, who is tonight's amplifier. Thank you so much, Jesse. It only takes $5 per month. That gets you in. That's all we ask. So check it out. That's patreon.com/freetalklive or just amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. Let's keep going with the phones. He was in here in the studio with us, I think about 2, maybe 3 months ago. We have Max Abramson here with us, who recently ran for office here in New Hampshire. Max, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind tonight?
Oh, so Yuri Bezmenov, previous caller, he was a KGB officer who defected in 1970, and he did a number of speeches and interviews warning people about most of what the KGB was doing was targeting Western countries, not so much for espionage, but for subversion. And the Soviet Union and a lot of wealthy European socialists and communists paid Marxist college professors over the years to push their version of Marxism in the U.S. And Britain. And that's where a lot of this indoctrination has come from. And that's why we've gotten a lot of their policies.
It definitely seems to persist into today because people do go to college and they come out leftists.
Who's paying them now?
The liberal arts programs. And I had socialist and Marxist college professors in my liberal arts programs. I think 96% of sociology professors' ideas socialist, 25% ideas Marxist. But what I wanted to call about, if I can really quick,
yeah, of course.
People are talking about what Donald Trump is going to do, this, that, and the other thing, and all the news coverage is this. About 70 to 80% of the political powers in Congress, and the same thing at the state level is your state legislature. Whether people are in New Hampshire or not, state legislators are meeting right now, and they're talking about the bills that they want to put in. So if people, whatever state they happen to be in, want to get jury nullification, ending the drug war, drug decrim, marijuana decrim, ending qualified immunity, dash cams, police body cams, police commissions, all these different liberty bills that we need to work on. Folks should call their legislator right away, ideally tomorrow or the next day, because deadlines are coming up. New Hampshire, it's November 22nd to get bills in.
Oh.
So people have to really get on top of things.
That's also a really good point, Max, and I want to thank you for pointing it out, that I tried telling this to people right after the election, especially people here in New Hampshire. The governor election here in New Hampshire is going to have a significantly bigger impact on people's lives than the presidential election.
Yeah.
And I don't really know much about either one of the candidates. Maybe you can enlighten me, but I didn't really follow either of them closely because, I mean, between a Republican and a Democratic governor, I didn't really see much difference. But New Hampshire is weird in that at the same time that New Hampshire went for Kamala Harris, it also elected the Republican governor, Kelly Ayotte. And that's a curious...
Kelly Ayotte, she's not a big friend to liberty. Hopefully she might change. We'll have to see what she does over the next 2 years, but it's really the state house and state senate where most of the bills go through. Right now we've got a narrow majority in the state house and a pretty solid majority in the state senate. It's the state house where we have, these 100+ liberty Republicans who are really been great. And in particular, about 30 or 40 have really been solidly, almost as good as Constitution Party or Libertarian Party, pretty solid defenders of your constitutional rights. But that's also the place where we can sustain vetoes. It's also a place where we came 1 vote shy of ending qualified immunity the last time I was in.
Ooh.
So that was a squeaker. I mean, literally, we have a dozen recounts a year in legislative races, and we have tons and tons of liberty bills that come down to 1 vote in the state house or state senate. So it's really, really important that people vote in their September state primary, get involved in the process in your state legislature, watch what's going on. Even if you live in a state where you're not allowed to testify on bills, show up to the state house, meet your legislators, talk to them about what's important, because a lot of stuff like term limits or whatever you might be promoting, balanced budget amendment, that stuff doesn't happen unless it starts in the state legislatures.
Are there states where you're not allowed to testify on bills?
Isn't that normal?
New Hampshire. So when I was in Washington, Olympia, Washington, I never saw private citizens speaking in front of committee on bills.
Yeah, I've only heard of that in New Hampshire.
Well, I guess that's just another way that I take New Hampshire for granted then. I just assumed it was normal for people to be able to do that.
Well, bigger states like New York and California, you're really kind of cut off.
Yeah.
Because their districts are as large as congressional districts anyway.
Yeah, there's too many people that make that work, I think.
But you can still, most of the time, you can't see your member of Congress 90% of the time if you visit D.C., but if you go to your state legislature and talk to your legislator, most of the time they'll introduce a bill or amendment on your behalf just because you showed up. And then when they come back to the district, see them again, make sure that they see your face twice. And then when it's Q&A time, be sure that you ask, bring lots of friends, family, neighbors. Those legislative meetups, there's probably nationwide, maybe 3% of Americans are actually paying any attention, getting involved in state and local. New Hampshire, it's about 10%.
Really?
So the more people, much, much higher than other states. We have the legislative office building is usually full when I was there.
Nice.
When we had, that's a positive, but I always had people come up and say, Max, you were right. The Democrats are crazy. And I'm like, I got a couple of Republicans who are nuts also.
Yeah.
I mean, but that, again, voting out the big government authoritarian rhinos in the state primary in September and then showing up and voting out the Democrats in November. Although I don't even vote a completely straight ticket. There were 1 or 2 authoritarians I knew where I voted against them. Or, you can vote third party or whatever you want, but your 1 vote actually makes a much, much bigger difference in your state primary. It's July in some states, August in other states, September in some states.
That's true. And thank you for the call tonight, Max. I really appreciate it. And you're right about the primary, especially being your opportunity to have a big impact on the outcome of the election. Because when I won my primary in 2020, I was unopposed officially. There was a write-in campaign against me, but that was obviously doomed to failure. I won the primary with 4,400 votes. That's all it took to win. 4,000 votes. And that's a lot of votes. But you got to remember, I was the only one on the ballot. So everyone who voted for me. But even in most areas, like you're going to probably win your primary with a third of that. With 1,000 to 1,500 votes, I would speculate is going to win in most cases. Because realistically, those 4,000 votes should have been split across two candidates.
I remember somebody telling me that to win, it required like $200 or something like that. And I don't know where they got that number from, but that just always blew my mind.
Yeah, I don't know where they got that number from either. Yeah. I spent well over $200 on my campaign, but that was on signs.
Right, like I mean, that's what I'm thinking. Like, is that just signs?
But door knocking is extremely effective here in New Hampshire. That was how Matt Santonastasso won his election when he won his state house election a few years ago. The man put in a tremendous amount of work going door to door, meeting people, talking to them, finding out their concerns, and just, introducing himself to them. In New Hampshire, that's how you win office. And I've heard that over and over throughout my time here in New Hampshire. So maybe that's how they come to that number, $200 in gas for door knocking, and presumably a lot of time. It works, especially here in New Hampshire. And Max is absolutely right. Your state legislature is going to impact you so much more than the federal. Now, people are concerned that Trump is going to send abortion back to the states or whatever. Okay, so do something about your state legislator. Do something about that then, so that if Trump does send it back to the states, you don't have to worry about it because you've got pro-choice people in office, right? Those are the ones that you got to worry about because your state, they're the ones passing the laws that actually affect you on a day-to-day basis.
See, this is why I like open borders. I can walk across the state line, and pick another state.
Yes, you can.
And I did. In 2016, I moved from New Jersey to New Hampshire.
The hardest part of doing that is getting a New Hampshire driver's license. That's the only difficult part of moving to New Hampshire.
Weren't you able to just trade it in?
No, I had to also take them my birth certificate, my social security card, my proof of residency.
Oh, wow. I think I just had to trade mine in. I think it was just literally handing my New Jersey driver's license over.
No, you had to at least provide proof of residency as well. I mean, things could have been different when you first did it.
I had to do proof of residency, I think, Bob had to do proof of residency for something.
But they required everything from me. Like, it was me getting my very first driver's license again.
Yeah, I think
it was tedious and exhausting, but I finally did it.
There might have been something else I needed, or a couple of other items I needed.
I legally changed my name back in 2020. Or maybe it was 2000. No, it was 2020.
When I think it was just a matter of trading in, I'm thinking of I didn't have to take a test again, which is something that you used to have to do.
Yeah, so. I didn't have to take a test again either. I just had to have a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
Which I finally got all together, and I was really motivated to do this when I first got out of prison. So I made my appointment. I went there. They were like, "Nope, you don't have the paperwork that you need." So I came back a week later with all my paperwork, and nope, for some reason, I had Michael Hampton's birth certificate. Michael Hampton was living with me prior to the FBI raid, after which he moved to Manchester. Then he died. And I was the one who cleaned out his apartment and, collected his ashes and death certificate and all of that stuff because apparently I was closer to him than anyone else who knew. And for some reason, I ended up with his birth certificate, and I didn't know it. So when I opened up my file cabinet and looked for a birth certificate and saw one, I just grabbed it, didn't check the name on it. It was just like, why would I have anyone else's birth certificate, right? It didn't even occur to me that it could be someone else's, but it was. So I got there, she's like, who is Michael Hampton? I was like, what? And sure enough, but I did go. Finally got it all sorted out on just about 2 weeks ago. I finally got my New Hampshire driver's license
That's interesting.
Yeah, finally.
You're the second person that this week or this month got their ID for New Hampshire.
Yeah, it was a tedious process. Name change, gender change, residency change, all of that stuff.
Oh, that must have added a ton of paperwork.
No, that was no paperwork.
Really?
Yeah, that was the easiest part. But thanks for listening. We're out of time tonight. Check us out online in the meantime at freetalklive.com.
On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night.
from there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So,